Chapter 1. The Awakening of Thought. From Mythos to Logos. Picture yourself standing on the rocky coastline of ancient Ionia, around 600 BCE. The Mediterranean sun glints off the waves as merchant ships from distant lands dock in bustling harbors. In the markets, traders haggle in multiple languages while exchanging goods, ideas, and stories from across the known world. It is here, in these vibrant Greek city-states scattered along the coastlines and islands of the Aegean Sea, that something extraordinary is about to happen. Something that will change the course of human thought forever. For thousands of years, humans had explained the mysteries of existence through stories. Why does the sun rise and set? The gods command it. What causes earthquakes? Poseidon's anger. Where do storms come from? Zeus hurls his thunderbolts. These mythical explanations, passed down through generations of storytellers and poets like Homer and Hesiod, provided comfort and meaning to ancient peoples. But in the Greek world of the 6th century BCE, a revolutionary shift was beginning to take place. A transition from mythos, story, myth, to logos, reason, rational explanation. The Greek world, a perfect storm for philosophy. To understand why philosophy emerged in ancient Greece, we must first understand the unique circumstances that made this intellectual revolution possible. The Greek world was unlike anything that had come before it, creating what we might call a perfect storm for philosophical thinking. Geography as destiny. Greece's geography played a crucial role in shaping the Greek mind. Unlike the vast, unified river valleys of Egypt or Mesopotamia, Greece was a fragmented landscape of mountains, islands, and coastal plains. This natural fragmentation led to the development of independent city-states, polis, Athens, Sparta, Thebes, Corinth, and hundreds of others, each with its own government customs and way of life. This political fragmentation had profound intellectual consequences. Unlike subject of vast empires who might accept a single, unified worldview imposed by a powerful ruler and priesthood, Greeks were constantly exposed to different ways of thinking and living. An Athenian merchant might encounter Spartan warriors with their rigid military discipline, Corinthian artists with their love of beauty, and Egyptian priests with their ancient wisdom, all in a single trading voyage. The sea, rather than dividing the Greeks, connected them. The Mediterranean became a Greek lake, as colonists established cities from Spain to the Black Sea. This maritime culture fostered trade, travel, and exchange of ideas. Greeks became natural cosmopolitans, comfortable with diversity, and accustomed to questioning local customs when they encountered foreign alternatives. A society of competing ideas. Greek society was fundamentally competitive. This competitive spirit, which they called agon, permeated every aspect of life. From athletic competitions like the Olympics to dramatic contests in theaters, from political debates and assemblies to intellectual disputes in public spaces. Greeks didn't just compete with their bodies, they competed with their minds. This competitive culture created an environment where ideas had to prove themselves in open debate. Unlike societies where truth was handed down by religious authorities or absolute rulers, Greek city-states developed traditions of public discourse. Citizens gathered in assemblies to debate policy, in theaters to witness competing tragic interpretations of human nature, and in gymnasiums to discuss philosophy. Ideas that couldn't withstand scrutiny and argument were discarded. Those that survived became stronger. The Greeks also developed a unique relationship with their gods. Unlike the omnipotent, morally perfect deities of monotheistic religions, Greek gods were flawed, quarrelsome, and remarkably human-like. Zeus committed adultery, Hera plotted revenge, and Ares loved war for its own sake. These imperfect deities left room for human reason and moral judgment. If even the gods could be criticized and questioned, then surely human ideas and institutions could be examined as well. Economic prosperity and intellectual leisure. The 6th century BCE was a time of unprecedented prosperity for many Greek city-states. Trade networks stretched from Spain to India, bringing not only material wealth but also intellectual treasures. Mathematical knowledge from Babylon, astronomical observations from Egypt, and philosophical insights from Persia and India. This prosperity created, for the first time in human history, a significant class of people who didn't need to spend all their time struggling for survival. Wealth meant leisure, and leisure meant time to think. The Greek concept of skol, from which we get our word school, originally meant leisure time devoted to learning and contemplation. For the first time, human beings could afford to pursue knowledge for its own sake rather than merely for immediate practical needs. The Great Transition, when stories became questions. The transition from mythical to rational thinking didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process that began in the Greek colonies of Ionia, modern-day Turkey, and slowly spread throughout the Greek world. But what exactly did this transition involve? The limits of mythical thinking. Traditional mythical explanations served important social and psychological functions. They provided meaning, comfort, and social cohesion. When a child asked why winter comes, the story of Persephone's annual journey to the underworld offered not just an explanation, but also a rich narrative that connected the questioner to cultural traditions and moral lessons. However, as Greeks encountered more cultures and their conflicting mythologies, problems arose. Egyptian creation myths differ from Greek ones, which differed from Persian ones. If Zeus ruled from Mount Olympus, how could the Egyptians believe that Ra sailed across the sky in a solar boat? Which stories were true? Could they all be true? Or might none of them be true? More practically, mythical explanations often fail to provide useful predictions or solutions. Knowing that Poseidon caused earthquakes didn't help predict when they would occur or how to build structures that could withstand them. Understanding that Demeter controlled the harvest didn't provide practical agricultural knowledge about soil conditions, weather patterns, or crop rotation. The birth of rational inquiry. The first Greek philosophers approached these problems with a revolutionary method. Instead of asking, what story explains this phenomenon, they began asking what natural processes could account for what we observe. This shift from supernatural to natural explanations marked the birth of rational inquiry. Consider the difference in approach. When ancient people saw lightning, they might say, Zeus is angry. When early Greek philosophers saw lightning, they might ask, what natural process could create such a bright flash and loud sound? This simple change in questioning opened up entirely new ways of understanding the world. The early philosophers didn't reject the possibility of divine involvement entirely, but they insisted that natural phenomena should have natural explanations. Even if God existed, the world operated according to discoverable principles that human reason could understand. This was a radical idea, that mortals could understand the fundamental workings of reality through observation and thinking, the search for universal principles. Perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of early Greek philosophy was the search for universal principles that could explain multiple phenomena. Instead of having separate stories for each natural event, philosophers sought underlying causes that could account for many different observations. Thales, traditionally considered the first Western philosopher, made the bold claim that everything was ultimately made of water. While this might seem crude to us today, it represented a conceptual breakthrough. Thales was proposing that beneath the bewildering diversity of natural phenomena lay a single, unifying principle, something that could be understood through reason rather than revealed through stories. This search for unity beneath diversity became the hallmark of philosophical thinking. Philosophers began asking questions that no one had systematically asked before. What is the fundamental nature of reality? What makes something real or true? How can we distinguish between appearance and reality? What principles govern change and permanence? The first philosophical questions. As Greeks began to apply rational inquiry to the world around them, certain fundamental questions emerged that would occupy philosophers for millennia to come. The nature of reality. The most basic philosophical question was perhaps the most radical. What is real? This question emerged from the observation that the world of our senses seems constantly changing and often contradictory. Water could be liquid, solid, or gaseous. The sun appears small but seems to provide enormous heat. Our senses sometimes deceive us. The stick looks bent in water, but feels straight to our touch. If our senses can't always be trusted, how can we know what's really real? This question led philosophers to distinguish between the world of appearances, how things seem to us, and the world of reality, how things actually are. This distinction would prove to be one of the most fruitful and problematic ideas in all of philosophy. The problem of change. Greeks lived in a world of constant change. Seasons alternating, people aging, cities rising and falling, ideas evolving. Yet they also observed elements of permanence. Mathematical relationships that never varied, moral principles that seemed universal, logical rules that held across cultures. How could they reconcile change and permanence? Some early philosophers, like Heraclitus, emphasized change. "You cannot step into the same river twice," he famously declared, meaning that both you and the river are constantly changing. Others, like Parmenides, emphasized permanence, arguing that true reality must be unchanging and eternal. This tension between change and permanence would drive philosophical inquiry for centuries. The role of human reason. Perhaps most importantly, Greek philosophers began to ask, what can human reason accomplish? Can thinking alone reveal truths about reality? What are the limits and proper methods of rational inquiry? This question was revolutionary because it implied that human beings, through their own mental efforts, could discover fundamental truths about existence. This was a far cry from traditional views that saw truth as something revealed by gods or inherited from ancestors. The Greeks were essentially claiming that each human being carried within themselves a powerful tool, reason, that could unlock the secrets of the universe. Why Greece? The unique conditions for philosophy's birth. Looking back from our contemporary perspective, we might wonder, why did this intellectual revolution happen in Greece rather than in Egypt, with its ancient wisdom, or China, with its sophisticated culture, or India, with its deep spiritual traditions? While philosophy did develop in other cultures, the particular form of rational, systematic inquiry that we call Western philosophy first flourished in the Greek world. Why? The absence of powerful priesthoods. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, where powerful priestly classes controlled access to knowledge and maintained strict orthodoxies, Greek religion was remarkably decentralized. There was no Greek equivalent of the Egyptian pharaoh god or the Mesopotamian priest king. Greek priests were more like caretakers of temples and guardians of absolute truth. This religious decentralization meant that there were fewer institutional barriers to questioning traditional beliefs. A Greek thinker who proposed that the gods didn't actually control natural phenomena might face social disapproval, but wouldn't necessarily face execution or exile, though Socrates would later discover that limits did exist. The democratic experiment. Many Greek city-states experimented with various forms of democratic governance, most famously Athens. Democracy required citizens to make collective decisions about war and peace, laws and policies, trade and diplomacy. Success in democratic politics required the ability to persuade others through rational argument rather than through appeals to traditional authority or divine revelation. This political environment created a culture that valued logical reasoning, evidence-based argument, and critical examination of competing ideas. Skills that were useful in political assembly, analyzing arguments, detecting fallacies, constructing persuasive cases, were the same skills that proved valuable in philosophical inquiry. Cultural confidence and curiosity. The Greeks developed a remarkable combination of cultural confidence and intellectual curiosity. They were proud of their achievements, their art, their politics, their military victories. But they were also intensely curious about other cultures and ideas. This combination allowed them to appreciate foreign wisdom while maintaining the confidence to improve upon it. Greek travelers and traders brought back mathematical knowledge from Babylon, astronomical observations from Egypt, and moral insights from Persia. But instead of simply adopting these foreign ideas wholesale, Greeks felt free to examine them critically, to test them against their own observations, and to develop new syntheses. The written word. The Greeks adapted the Phoenician alphabet around 800 BCE, creating the first writing system that could easily represent both consonants and vowels. This innovation had profound implications for philosophical development. Writing allowed for more precise formulation of arguments, easier detection of logical inconsistencies, and the preservation of ideas across generations. A philosopher could now set down their thoughts carefully, revise them, and create complex arguments that could be studied and criticized by others. Philosophy became a cumulative enterprise, with each thinker able to build upon or tear down the work of predecessors. The lasting revolution, the intellectual revolution that began in ancient Greece around 600 BC, was not just a historical curiosity. It fundamentally changed how humans think about themselves and their world. The shift from mythos to logos established several principles that continue to guide intellectual inquiry today. The faith in human reason. The belief that human beings, through careful thinking and observation, can understand fundamental truths about reality. the demand for natural explanations, the insistence that natural phenomena should be explained through natural causes rather than supernatural interventions, the value of critical inquiry, the conviction that all ideas, no matter how traditional or sacred, should be subject to rational examination and criticism, the search for universal principles, the quest to discover underlying laws or patterns that can explain multiple phenomena. As we stand on the threshold of this philosophical journey, we can see that the ancient Greeks didn't just invent philosophy. They invented a new way of being human. They showed that mortals need not be passive recipients of inherited wisdom or divine revelation. Instead, every human being could become a philosopher, a lover of wisdom, actively engaged in the eternal quest to understand reality and our place within it. The story of how this intellectual adventure unfolded and how it continues to shape our world today is the story we'll explore in the chapters that follow. But it all began here, in the busy ports and marketplaces of ancient Greece, when a few curious individuals first dared to ask not just what do the old stories tell us, but what can we figure out for ourselves? Thales and the pre-Socratic philosophers. This chapter marks the true beginning of Western philosophy, moving beyond mythical narratives to embrace rational inquiry. It explores the foundational ideas of the pre-Socratic thinkers who, driven by curiosity and a nascent scientific spirit, sought to understand the fundamental nature of the cosmos. Their groundbreaking attempts to identify a singular, underlying principal reality, known as the Arche, laid the groundwork for all subsequent philosophical and scientific thought. 2.1 The Dawn of Rational Inquiry. Why Miletus? Geographical and cultural context. Ionia as a cradle of thought. Discuss the unique position of Miletus, an affluent Greek city-state on the coast of Asia Minor. Its location at the crossroads of trade routes, cultures, Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Lydian, and intellectual currents made it fertile ground for new ideas. Economic prosperity and leisure. Explain how a thriving economy provided the leisure time necessary for intellectual pursuits, freeing some from the constant struggle for survival. Absence of dogmatic religious authority. Contrast Greek polytheism with the more rigid theological systems of other ancient civilizations. The lack of an established priestly class or sacred texts dictating cosmic explanations allowed for more speculative and critical thinking about the natural world. This freedom was crucial for challenging traditional myths. Early scientific observation. Highlight the practical knowledge accumulated by the Milesians through navigation, astronomy, and trade, which fostered an empirical mindset. The shift from mythos to logos revisited briefly. Reinforce the transition discussed in Chapter 1. The move from anthropomorphic gods and supernatural explanations to impersonal, rational principles and natural causation. The pre-Socratics sought unity in diversity and order in chaos, believing there was a discoverable, underlying structure to reality. 2.2 Thales of Miletus, the first Western philosopher. Introducing the figure, often hailed as a father of Western philosophy, even though little of his own writing survives. Most of our knowledge comes from later accounts, Aristotle, Herodotus. Emphasis on his reputation as a wise man, an astronomer, and a practical thinker, engineering feats, business acumen. The quest for the Arche, first principle. What is the Arche? Define this key concept, the ultimate underlying fundamental substance or principle from which everything originates and into which everything returns. It's both the source and the essence of reality. Thales' proposal, water. Why water? Elaborate on his reasoning. Observation of water's omnipresence, rain, rivers, seas, its essential role for life, its ability to transform solid, liquid, gas, and its presence in semen and bodily fluids. A rational, natural explanation. The revolutionary aspect was not what he chose, but how he chose it, through observation and reason, not divine revelation. This was a radical break. Everything is full of gods. Discuss the debated interpretation of this statement. Was it a lingering animism or an early form of hylozoism? The belief that matter is alive or that life and matter are inseparable, suggesting that nature itself possesses an inherent dynamism? Anadoctes and wisdom, the all-oppressed monopoly, illustrate his practical intelligence and foresight, falling into a well while stargazing. A humorous tale highlighting the philosopher's detachment from earthly concerns, but also the potential pitfalls of pure theoretical pursuit. predicting an eclipse. If true, this demonstrates advanced astronomical knowledge and calculation, further cementing his reputation as a proto-scientist. Thales' enduring legacy. His greatest contribution was posing the fundamental question of the Archie and proposing a naturalistic answer. He initiated the philosophical tradition of seeking underlying principles for phenomena, paving the way for science. 2.3 Anaximander of Miletus, the boundless in the cosmos, student and critic of Thales. Anaximander recognized the limitations of Thales' water Archie. If water is the source, what does it become? How can it explain its opposite, e.g. fire? The concept of the apeiron, the boundless/unlimited, beyond observable elements. Anaximander proposed that the Archie could not be any specific observable element, like water, air, or fire, because those elements are themselves determinate and have opposites, indefinite and unlimited. The apeiron is formless, eternal, inexhaustible, and encompasses all things. It's a truly abstract concept, a significant leap in philosophical abstraction. Mechanism of emergence. From the apeiron, opposites, hot/cold, wet/dry, differentiate and separate through process of drawing off or separation, giving rise to the cosmos. Cosmology and justice. Cyclical process. The cosmos arises from the apeiron and eventually dissolves back into it, a continuous cycle governed by a principle of cosmic justice or balance, giving satisfaction and reparation to one another for their injustice according to the ordering of time. This famous fragment suggests a natural law governing the interaction and dissolution of opposites, preventing any one element from dominating. First known map in astronomical models. Anaximander is credited with drawing the first map of the inhabited world and conceiving a model of the cosmos with celestial bodies moving in rings and Earth floating unsupported at the center. Origin of life. Speculated that life originated in water and that humans evolved from fish-like creatures, a remarkably prescient idea. Anaximander's innovation introduced a high level of abstraction into philosophical thought. Conceived a dynamic, self-regulating cosmos governed by impartial laws, not divine whims. His emphasis on balance and justice foreshadowed later ethical and political philosophy. 2.4 Anaximenes of Miletus. Refinement through air. Bridging the gap. Anaximenes, a younger contemporary and student of Anaximander, sought a more concrete Archie than the apeiron, but one capable of explaining the emergence of diverse substances. His proposal, air, air. Why air? Air is pervasive, seemingly infinite, and vital for life, breath. Mechanism of change, rarefaction and condensation. This was Anaximenes' genius. He proposed that different substances arise from air through quantitative changes. Rarefaction, air becoming fire thinner. Condensation, air becoming wind, then cloud, then water, then earth, then stone denser. This offered a mechanistic explanation for qualitative differences from a single underlying substance. Cosmology and the soul believed the earth was a flat disk floating on air and stars were fixed to a crystalline sphere. Saw the soul psyche as air connecting the human microcosm to the cosmic macrocosm. Just as our soul, being air, holds us together, so do breath and air encompass the whole world. Anaximenes' significance provided a more empirical and mechanistic model for cosmic change than Anaximander, demonstrated that a single Archie could explain diversity through processes of transformation, a crucial step for scientific thinking. 2.5 Heraclitus of Ephesus, the philosophy of constant flux, a solitary and enigmatic figure, known as the obscure due to his aphoristic and often paradoxical style, challenged conventional wisdom and emphasized the elusive pantarei, everything flows, the doctrine of flux, his most famous assertion. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. Reality is characterized by constant change, movement, and becoming, not static being. Unity of opposites. The world is a dynamic interplay of opposing forces, day/night, good/evil, hot/cold. These oppositions are not contradictory, but interdependent and essential for the existence of things. The road up and the road down are one and the same. The logos as universal reason. Despite constant change, Heraclitus posited an underlying ordering principle, the logos, reason, word, law. This logos guides and unifies the flux, giving it structure and intelligibility, though humans often fail to comprehend it. Fire as the archie. Symbolic fire symbolizes a perpetual change and energetic transformation that defines reality, constantly consuming and becoming. It's a metaphor for the dynamic nature of the cosmos, rather than a material substance like water or air. Heraclitus's impact emphasized the dynamic and relational nature of reality, profoundly influencing later dialectical thought, e.g. Hegel. Introduced the concept of an impersonal, rational order, logos, governing the universe. His ideas presented a stark contrast to Parmenides, setting up a fundamental tension in early Greek philosophy. 2.6 Parmenides of Elea, the quest for immutable being, the founder of the Eleatic school, a profound and rigorous thinker who used logical deduction to arrive at startling conclusions, directly challenging the sensory world and the idea of change. The way of truth versus the way of opinion. Parmenides' philosophical poem, Fragments Survive, presents a divine revelation guiding him to the truth. The way of truth, aletheia, this path is accessed through reason, logos, alone. It leads to the understanding of what truly is. The way of opinion, doxa, this path is based on sensory experience, which is deceptive and leads to error and illusion, e.g., the perception of change and multiplicity. The doctrine of the one, unchanging being. It is, and it is impossible for it not to be. Forward such what is. This is his central axiom. Existence is all-encompassing. There is no non-being nothingness, because to speak of it would be to speak of something that is not, which is logically impossible. Implications of what is, it is uncreated and indestructible. If it came from non-being, non-being would have to exist. If it could be destroyed, it will become non-being. It is eternal and timeless, no beginning, no end. It is unchanging. Change implies movement into non-being or from non-being, which is impossible. It is indivisible in one. If it were divisible, there would have to be non-being between its parts. If there were multiple beings, they would be separated by non-being. It is immovable. Movement requires empty space, non-being, to move into. It is perfect and spherical. A perfect sphere represents completeness and uniformity, the rejection of sensory experience. Parmenides concluded that our senses deceive us. What we perceive as change, motion, and multiplicity is mere illusion. True reality, grasped by reason, is static, unified, and eternal. Parmenides' profound influence forced subsequent philosophers to grapple with the problem of change versus permanence, established the primacy of reason over sensory experience as the path to truth. His rigorous deductive method became a model for philosophical argumentation, directly influenced Plato's theory of forms, which sought to reconcile Parmenides' immutable being with a changing world observed by Heraclitus. 2.7 Other key pre-Socratic voices, briefly, for context and diversity. Empedocles, pluralist, attempted to reconcile Heraclitus and Parmenides, proposed four root elements, fire, air, water, earth, as eternal and unchanging Parmenidean influence. Change results from a mixing and separation of these elements driven by two forces, love, attraction, and strife, repulsion, Heraclitean influence. Anaxagoras, mind/nous, introduced the concept of nous, mind or intellect, as the ordering principle of the cosmos, believed everything contained seeds of everything else, and nous brings order out of an initial chaotic mixture. Democritus and Leucippus, atomists, proposed that reality consists of indivisible, imperceptible particles called atoms moving in an infinite void non-being. All change and diversity result from the combination and separation of these atoms. A radically materialistic and deterministic view of the universe, with no need for divine intervention or abstract principles. They accepted the void non-being as real. 2.8 The enduring legacy of the first thinkers, laying the foundation for Western thought. From myth to reason, they irrevocably shifted the paradigm from supernatural explanations to rational inquiry and natural causation, the birth of metaphysics. Their quest for the archie established the fundamental questions about the nature of reality that would define metaphysics for millennia. Precursors of science. Their emphasis on observation, Milesians, mechanistic explanation, Anaximenes, logical deduction, Parmenides, and atomic theory, Democritus, laid the groundwork for future scientific methods and discoveries. The problem of change and permanence. Heraclitus and Parmenides presented a fundamental philosophical tension that Plato and Aristotle would attempt to resolve, shaping the course of philosophical debate. The dawn of abstract thought. Anaximander of Pyrrhon and Parmenides' being demonstrated capacity for highly abstract conceptualization, moving beyond concrete observations. The incomplete revolution. While groundbreaking, their theories often lacked empirical verification, which wasn't a concept yet, and systematic argumentation in the way later philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, would develop. Their diverse and often contradictory conclusions highlighted the need for more rigorous methods, paving the way for the Socratic revolution, which turned philosophy inwards towards the man who knew nothing. The intellectual landscape of ancient Greece underwent a profound transformation in the 5th century BCE. While the pre-Socratics had brilliantly steered inquiry towards the fundamental nature of the cosmos, a new kind of philosopher emerged in Athens, redirecting the gaze of thought from the stars to the soul. This was Socrates, a figure whose life, method, and eventual martyrdom would indelibly alter the course of Western philosophy, shifting its focus from a natural world to the intricate world of human ethics, morality, and self-knowledge. He was a quintessential urban philosopher, engaging citizens in the bustling Athenian marketplace, challenging their assumptions, and exposing their ignorance, all while famously claiming to know nothing himself. 3.1 Socrates. From natural philosophy to moral philosophy. The Athenian context of the 5th century BC, Golden Age of Athens, discussed the flourishing of democracy, arts, and intellectual life under Pericles. This was a vibrant, argumentative, and self-confident city. Rise of the Sophists. Introduced the Sophists as itinerant teachers of rhetoric and persuasion, highly influential in a democratic society where public speaking was crucial for political success. Their focus on practical skills, relativism, man as a measure of all things, Protagoras, and often charging for their lessons, stood in stark contrast to Socrates. Socrates saw them as intellectual adversaries who claimed to teach virtue, but often prioritized winning arguments over seeking truth. Shift in philosophical focus. Explain the general intellectual milieu before Socrates, where pre-Socratic cosmology dominated. Socrates' unique contribution was to turn philosophical inquiry away from the physis, nature, and towards the polis, city-state, and the psyche, soul/mind. He believed that understanding human virtue and the good life was more pressing than understanding the origins of the universe. Who was Socrates? A portrait of an enigmatic figure. Appearance and lifestyle. Described as distinctive physical appearance, unconventional, snub-nosed, stout, and a simple, almost ascetic lifestyle. He walked barefoot, wore simple cloaks, and seemed indifferent to material wealth. Contrast with Sophists, emphasized that he never charged for his teaching, considering it a divine mission. He didn't claim to be a teacher of wisdom, but a seeker of it. The oracle at Delphi. Recount the story of his friend Chaerephon asking the oracle if anyone was wiser than Socrates, and the oracle's reply that no one was. This pronouncement set Socrates on his lifelong mission to test the oracle's statement by questioning those reputed to be wise. The wisest is he who knows nothing. Explain how Socrates interpreted the oracle's message. His wisdom lay precisely in his awareness of his own ignorance. Unlike others who falsely believed they possessed knowledge, this humility became a cornerstone of his approach. 3.2 The Socratic Method. Irony and Maieutic. The essence of his philosophical practice. Socrates did not write books or deliver formal lectures. His philosophy was embodied in his dialogues and the act of questioning. His method was intensely interactive, typically involving a one-on-one conversation in the agora, marketplace, or gymnasium. Socratic irony as a starting point. Pretense of ignorance. Explain how Socrates would often begin by feigning ignorance and asking seemingly simple questions about a concept, e.g., what is piety? What is courage? What is justice? Exposing false knowledge. His initial humility allowed him to gently, or sometimes sharply, lead his interlocutor to expose inconsistencies, contradictions, and ultimately, their lack of true understanding of the very concepts they claimed to know. It was a tool to clear the ground of preconceived notions and unexamined beliefs. The purpose, not to mock or humiliate, but to disabuse people of their false wisdom, opening them to genuine inquiry. It was a necessary first step towards knowledge. Maieutic midwifery, as the goal, analogy to childbirth. Socrates, whose mother was a midwife, famously compared his method to midwifery. He didn't put knowledge into his students, but rather helped them give birth to the knowledge that was already latent within them. Guiding questions. Detail how, through a series of probing questions, Socrates would guide his interlocutor to examine their own beliefs, refine their definitions, and discover deeper truths, aiming for aporia and definition. Aporia, the state of perplexity, confusion, or impasse achieved when contradictions are revealed. This was a crucial stage, as it signified the breaking down of false certainty and the readiness for genuine learning. Definition. The ultimate goal was to arrive at clear, universal, and consistent definitions of ethical concepts, moving beyond mere examples or superficial understanding. Examples of the Socratic method in action, drawing on Platonic dialogues. Briefly reference dialogues like Euthyphro, what is piety, Laches, what is courage, or Charmides, what is moderation, show how initial definitions fail under scrutiny. Emphasize that the dialogues often ended in aporia, without a definitive answer, as the process of questioning was often more important than the specific conclusion. The value lay in the intellectual journey and the realization of ignorance. Critique of the Socratic method, briefly, while revolutionary, it could be frustrating for those questioned, leading to resentment and accusations of sophistry or intellectual arrogance. This partially contributed to his unpopularity. 3.3 Know thyself and the importance of self-knowledge. The Delphic maxim. Explain the origin of nothai soten gaminuthe iota sigma epsilon alpha epsilon tau nu as an inscription at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Socrates adopted this maxim as the cornerstone of his philosophy, elevating it from a practical admonition to a profound ethical imperative. The soul, psyche, as the seat of virtue. Socrates was the first philosopher to systematically explore the concept of the soul, psyche, not merely as a life force, but as a seat of intellect, character, and moral being. For Socrates, caring for one's soul, its moral state, was the most important human endeavor, far more important than wealth, reputation, or bodily well-being. Virtue is knowledge, intellectualism. No one does wrong willingly. This radical Socratic tenet implies that all wrongdoing stems from ignorance of what is truly good. If one truly knew what was good, they would always act accordingly. The unity of virtues. He believed that all virtues, courage, justice, piety, moderation, were ultimately forms of knowledge and therefore interconnected. The examined life. The pursuit of self-knowledge through constant self-examination and critical reflection was essential for living a virtuous and truly human life. The unexamined life is not worth happiness, eudaimonia, through virtue. For Socrates, true happiness, eudaimonia, was not about external goods, but was a natural outcome of living a virtuous life, aligned with true knowledge. A good person cannot be harmed in their essence, soul. 3.4 The trial and death of Socrates, a landmark in the history of thought. The historical context of the trial. Post-Peloponnesian War Athens. The city was in a state of political instability and disillusionment after its defeat by Sparta. There was a desire to restore traditional values and punish those perceived as undermining the city. 30 Tyrants. Socrates' association with some figures who participated in the brief, brutal oligarchy, e.g. Critias, made him suspicious to the restored democracy, despite his opposition to the tyrants. The accusations. Impiety, Asabia not believing in the city's gods and introducing new divinities, referring to his daimonian or inner divine voice. Corrupting the youth, turning young men away from traditional values and towards questioning authority. These charges were likely pretexts for deeper resentments. His constant questioning, his association with unpopular figures, and his perceived arrogance by some. Socrates' defense, Plato's apology, not an apology in the modern sense. It's a defense of his life and philosophical mission, his divine mission. He argued that he was performing a public service, acting as a gadfly, horsefly, to Athens, stinging it out of its complacency and intellectual laziness. Refusal to compromise. He refused to stop philosophizing, stating he would obey God rather than men. He also refused to propose a lesser penalty that would acknowledge guilt. Condemnation. He was found guilty by a narrow margin. The acceptance of death, Plato's Crito and Phaedo. Refusal to escape. Despite Crito's pleas and the opportunity for exile, Socrates chose to remain and face the death penalty, drinking hemlock. Arguments for obedience to law. He argued that to escape would be to violate the laws of Athens, which had nourished him and which he had implicitly agreed to obey throughout his life. To break them now, simply because the verdict was unfavorable, would undermine the very fabric of the city and his own principles. Philosophers' fear of death. In Phaedo, he discusses the nature of the soul and argues that death is not to be feared by a true philosopher, as it may be the liberation of the soul to pure contemplation, a martyr for truth and reason. His death became a powerful symbol of intellectual integrity and courage in the face of injustice. It cemented his legacy as a figure who prioritized truth and virtue above all, even life itself. It profoundly affected his followers, especially Plato. 3.5 How Socrates Forever Changed Philosophy. The human turn in philosophy. Shift from cosmology to ethics. His most fundamental contribution was redirecting philosophy from the external world to the internal world of human values, morality, and the nature of the good life. Emphasis on the individual soul. He placed unprecedented importance on the care of the psyche as the core of human existence and happiness. The primacy of reason and critical self-examination. Foundation for rational ethics. His belief that virtue is knowledge laid the groundwork for all subsequent rational ethical theories. The value of doubt and questioning. He instilled the idea that true wisdom begins with acknowledging one's ignorance and relentlessly questioning assumptions, a cornerstone of critical thinking. Dialogical method as philosophical tool. He demonstrated the power of conversation, dialectic, and cross-examination as a primary means of philosophical inquiry, influencing thinkers from Plato to modern analytical philosophers. Influence on Plato and beyond. Plato's legacy. Socrates is a central figure in most of Plato's dialogues, and much of what we know about Socrates comes from Plato. Plato's own philosophy, particularly the theory of forms and the ideal state, can be seen as an attempt to systematize and expand upon Socratic insights, especially the search for universal definitions and the importance of virtue, foundational for Western ethics. His focus on virtue, the good life, and intellectual integrity laid the groundwork for Stoicism, Epicureanism, and countless later ethical systems. Inspiration for education. The Socratic method continues to be a powerful pedagogical tool, encouraging active learning and critical thinking. The search for absolute truth. Following the seismic impact of Socrates, a new intellectual giant emerged from the heart of Athens, Plato, a brilliant aristocrat, a former wrestling champion, and a deeply disillusioned political hopeful. Plato inherited the philosophical mantle from his revered teacher, but he did not merely perpetuate Socratic inquiry. Instead, he sought to build upon its foundations, addressing the challenges posed by the pre-Socratics, Heraclitus' flux versus Parmenides' unchanging being, and giving definitive answers to Socrates' ethical quest. Plato's response was nothing short of revolutionary, a grand, systematic philosophy centered on the existence of an absolute, unchanging reality beyond our senses, the world of forms. This bold assertion would forever shape Western metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and political thought, propelling philosophy into new realms of abstraction and idealism. 4.1 The life of Plato and his indebtedness to Socrates. Aristocratic roots and early life. Born into a prominent Athenian family, c. 428/427 BCE, with lineage tracing back to Solon. This background provided him with exceptional education and political connections. His original name was likely Aristocles. Platon, meaning broad, was a nickname, possibly due to his physique or broad intellectual scope. Initially destined for a political career, deeply influenced by the tumultuous politics of Athens during and after the Peloponnesian War. The transformative encounter with Socrates. Plato became Socrates' devoted student in his early 20s and remained so for about 8 years. This personal relationship was the most significant influence on his intellectual development. He was deeply impressed by Socrates' moral integrity, intellectual rigor, and unwavering commitment to truth, even in the face of death. Witnessing Socrates' trial and execution, as recounted in Plato's Apology, was a traumatic and pivotal event that profoundly disillusioned him with Athenian democracy and conventional politics. This event solidified his conviction that society needed fundamental philosophical reform, led by those who truly understood justice and goodness. Post-Socrates' journeys in the quest for wisdom. After Socrates' death, Plato traveled extensively, possibly to Egypt, Magna Graecia, Sicily. These travels exposed him to various philosophical currents, including Pythagoreanism, which influences emphasis on mathematics and the immortality of the soul, and the Eleatic school, Parmenides' ideas on unchanging being. His repeated, often frustrating, attempts to advise and influence the tyrants of Syracuse further convince him that genuine political reform required a new kind of leadership grounded in philosophical wisdom. 4.2 The theory of forms, the sensible world versus the intelligible world, the centrality of the forms. This is a cornerstone of Plato's entire philosophy, an attempt to resolve the philosophical dilemmas inherited from the pre-Socratics and provide a stable foundation for Socratic ethics. How can we have certain knowledge, episteme, if reality is constantly changing, Heraclitus? How can true being be reconciled with the apparent multiplicity and change we perceive, Parmenides? How can we define universal ethical concepts, justice, beauty, goodness, if everything is relative, sophists? 2 realms of reality. Plato proposed a metaphysical dualism, dividing reality into 2 distinct realms. The sensible world, world of becoming. This is a world we perceive through our 5 senses, the world of physical objects, experiences, and phenomena. It is imperfect, mutable, temporal, and subject to change, decay, and multiplicity. It is a world of appearances and opinions, doxa, not true knowledge. Examples: a specific beautiful flower, a particular act of justice, a single circle drawn in the sand. The intelligible world, world of being / world of forms / ideas. This is a non-physical, transcendent realm accessible only through intellect and reason. It is a realm of forms or ideas, which are perfect, eternal, immutable, universal, and non-material archetypes or essences. These forms are the true reality. They are what truly are. They are the objective standards for all things in the sensible world. Examples: the form of beauty, the form of justice, the form of the circle, the perfect concept of circularity. The relationship between the 2 worlds, participation, methexis, and imitation, mimesis. The sensible world participates in or imitates the forms. Physical objects are imperfect copies or reflections of their corresponding forms. A beautiful person is beautiful because they participate in the form of beauty. A just act is just because it imitates the form of justice. This relationship explains how we can recognize different instances of the same concept. They all derive their essence from the same form. The form of the good, the sun, in the intelligible world. At the apex of the hierarchy of forms is the form of the good. Just as the sun illuminates the sensible world and makes objects visible, the form of the good illuminates the intelligible world, making the other forms knowable and giving them their being and intelligibility. It is the source of all truth, beauty, and order in the cosmos, both intelligible and sensible. Epistemological implications. Knowledge as recollection and amnesis. How do we access the forms if they are not perceived by senses? Plato proposed anamnesis, or recollection. He believed that the human soul is immortal and pre-existed in the intelligible realm before being imprisoned in the body. Therefore, learning is not acquiring new information, but rather recollecting the forms that the soul already knew. Sensory experience merely serves as a trigger for this recollection. This explains how we can grasp universal concepts, e.g., perfect equality, even if we've never encountered them perfectly in the physical world. For point 3, the allegory of the cave. Knowledge, ignorance, and liberation. Purpose of the allegory. Presented in Book 7 of the Republic. The allegory of the cave is Plato's most famous and powerful illustration of his entire philosophy, especially his metaphysics, epistemology, and ethical/political project. Detailed unpacking of the allegory. The cave and the prisoners. Describe the prisoners chained from birth, facing a wall, able to see only shadows cast by figures manipulated by puppeteers behind them. The shadows represent the sensible world, the only reality the prisoners know. Their bondage represents our ignorance and reliance on sensory perception. The fire and the puppeteers. The fire represents a conventional understanding of reality, manufactured by those who control information, e.g. sophists, politicians, public opinion. The release and ascent. One prisoner is freed and forced to turn around, initially blinded by the fire, then by the light outside the cave. This painful ascent represents the arduous process of philosophical education and the transition from ignorance to true knowledge, the world outside the cave. Initial discomfort with the sunlight, the blinding truth, seeing reflections in water, then objects themselves, then the stars at night, and finally, the sun itself. The objects outside represent the forms, the true realities. The sun represents a form of the good, the ultimate source of light. The return to the cave. The freed prisoner, now enlightened, feels compelled to return to the cave to share the truth with his former companions. The reaction of the prisoners. They cannot comprehend his descriptions, mock him, and would likely kill him if he tried to unchain them, a clear allusion to Socrates' fate. This highlights the difficulty of enlightenment and the resistance of the unenlightened to truth, interpretations, and significance. Epistemological, the journey from opinion, doxa, to knowledge, episteme, the inadequacy of sensory experience for true understanding. Metaphysical, the distinction between the illusory sensible world and the real intelligible world. Ethical/political, the duty of an enlightened philosopher to guide society, the challenges faced by those who seek to reform the ignorant. Pedagogical, the difficult but necessary path of education, requiring coercion initially, but leading to liberation. For point for the Republic, justice, politics, and education. Context and scope. The Republic is Plato's most famous and comprehensive work, a vast dialogue exploring justice, the ideal state, the nature of the soul, education, and the role of the philosopher. It's not just a political treatise, but a blueprint for the good life and the good society. The quest for justice. The dialogue begins with the question, what is justice? And tackles conventional and often cynical definitions, e.g., Thrasymachus, justice is the interest of the stronger. Plato argues that justice is an objective reality, both in the individual soul and in the state. The just state, Kallipolis, an analogy to the soul. Plato constructs an ideal city-state, Kallipolis, as a large-scale analogy for the just individual soul, parts of the soul and their virtues. Reason, logisticon, seeks truth, rules wisely. Virtue, wisdom. Spirit/thumos, thymoeid seeks honor, courage, self-assertion. Virtue, courage. Appetite, epithemetican seeks bodily desires, pleasure. Virtue, temperance/moderation. Classes of the state and their virtues. Guardians, philosopher kings ruled by reason, possess wisdom. They are the rulers due to their knowledge of the forms, especially the good. Auxiliaries, soldiers ruled by spirit, possess courage. They enforce the laws and protect the state. Producers, workers, farmers, artisans ruled by appetite, possess temperance. They provide for the material needs of the state. Justice in the state and soul. Justice is achieved when each part performs its proper function harmoniously, without encroaching on the others. In the individual, reason must rule the spirited and appetitive parts. In the state, the wise guardians must rule. The role of the philosopher king. Plato famously argued that unless philosophers become kings, or those now called kings and rulers genuinely and adequately study philosophy, there will be no end to the troubles of states. Only those who have ascended to grasp the forms, particularly the form of good, are truly qualified to rule, as they understand what is ultimately good and just for the whole community. They rule reluctantly, out of duty, not desire for power. Plato's educational program. Education is paramount for shaping citizens, and especially for training the future philosopher kings. Early education, music and gymnastics for developing character and body. Higher education, mathematics, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, harmonics, to train the mind to think abstractly and move away from the sensible world. Dialectic, the highest form of education, engaging in philosophical discussion to grasp the forms themselves, culminating in the apprehension of the form of the good. This rigorous training ensures that rulers are truly wise and just. 4.5 The Academy, the first university of the Western world. Foundation and purpose. Around 387 BCE, Plato founded the Academy in a grove sacred to Hero Academus, just outside the walls of Athens. It was not merely a school, but a community of scholars and students dedicated to inquiry, research, and philosophical training. Its primary goal was to train future leaders and citizens in the rigorous pursuit of knowledge, particularly philosophy, mathematics, and dialectic, with the hope of eventually producing philosopher kings. Curriculum and methodology. The motto above its entrance reportedly read, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter here." This highlights the importance of mathematics as a prerequisite for philosophical understanding, preparing the mind for abstract thought. The curriculum included ethics, politics, metaphysics, epistemology, logic, and mathematics. Emphasis on dialogue, debate, and collaborative research, rather than rote memorization. Influence and longevity. The Academy operated for nearly 900 years, closing in 529 CE by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, making it one of the longest-lasting institutions of higher learning in history. It served as a model for future universities and intellectual centers in the Western world. Many prominent thinkers studied there, most notably Aristotle, who spent nearly 20 years as a student and teacher before founding his own school. The intellectual dynamism of the Academy stemmed from the active pursuit of philosophical problems and rigorous debate. The philosopher who cataloged the world. The intellectual lineage of Greek philosophy reached a towering peak with Aristotle, a mind so comprehensive and systematic that he earned the epithet, the master of those who know. While deeply indebted to his teacher, Plato, Aristotle embarked on his own philosophical journey, characterized by a profound respect for empirical observation, logical rigor, and a relentless drive to classify and understand every aspect of existence. He moved away from Plato's transcendent forms, anchoring philosophical inquiry firmly in the immanent world of phenomena. Aristotle didn't just speculate. He categorized, analyzed, and synthesized, creating a vast intellectual edifice that would dominate Western thought for nearly 2 millennia, shaping the very foundations of logic, ethics, politics, biology, physics, and metaphysics. 5.1 Aristotle, Plato's disciple, Alexander's teacher. Early life and education in Stagira. Born in 384 BCE in Stagira, a city in northern Greece, his father was physician to the Macedonian king, Amyntas III. This early exposure to medicine and biological inquiry likely fostered his empirical and observational tendencies. At the age of 17, he traveled to Athens and entered Plato's Academy, where he remained for nearly 20 years, first as a student and then as a teacher. Despite their profound philosophical differences, Aristotle always held Plato in high regard, acknowledging his genius while respectfully challenging his core doctrines. The famous Painting the School of Athens by Raphael vividly depicts this divergence. Plato points skyward to forms, while Aristotle gestures downward towards the observable world. The period of travel and tutelage of Alexander the Great. After Plato's death, Aristotle left Athens, possibly due to a decline in the Academy's philosophical direction or political tensions. He spent time in Assos and Mytilene, engaging in extensive biological research, particularly on marine life, which provided much of the empirical data for his scientific works. Around 343 BCE, King Philip II of Macedon invited Aristotle to become the tutor to his young son, Alexander, who would later become the Great. This tutelage lasted for several years and provided Aristotle with unique resources and insights, though the precise influence on Alexander's conquests is debated. It cemented Aristotle's place in history as the teacher of one of the world's most influential figures. 5.2 The classification of sciences and the organization of knowledge. The encyclopedic mind. Aristotle's true genius lay in his unparalleled ability to systematize and categorize nearly all existing knowledge of his time. He was arguably the first true polymath in Western history, writing on everything from biology and physics to poetry and rhetoric. Hierarchical classification of knowledge. Aristotle was meticulous in defining the scope and method of different fields of inquiry. He divided knowledge into distinct branches. Theoretical sciences. Theoria aimed at knowledge for its own sake, truth. First, philosophy. Metaphysics, the study of being as being, ultimate causes, and the divine. Deals with principles that apply to all existence. Physics. The study of nature, change, and motion in the sensible world. Mathematics. The study of abstract quantities, numbers, and forms. Practical sciences. Praxis aimed at guiding human action in the good life. Ethics. The study of individual character and the pursuit of human flourishing happiness. Politics. The study of the organization and governance of the polis, city-state, and the collective good. Productive sciences. Poiesis aimed at creating something, making. Rhetoric. The art of persuasive speaking. Poetics. The art of creating literary works, e.g. tragedy, comedy. Various arts and crafts. Carpentry, shoemaking, etc. Emphasis on empirical observation, empiria. Unlike Plato, who prioritized pure reason and the forms, Aristotle insisted that knowledge begins with sensory experience and observation of particular. He believed that universal principles could be induced from a careful examination of specific instances in the natural world. This inductive approach laid critical groundwork for the scientific method. His vast biological works, with detailed descriptions of animal anatomy and behavior, exemplify this commitment to empiricism. 5.3 Aristotelian logic. The syllogism and the scientific method. The birth of formal logic. Aristotle is universally recognized as the founder of formal logic. His work, compiled posthumously into the Organon instrument, was the first systematic treatise on reasoning and argumentation. The syllogism. Definition. The core of Aristotelian logic, a type of deductive reasoning where a conclusion is inferred from two premises. Structure. Typically involve a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. Example, all men are mortal, major premise, plus Socrates is a man, minor premise, equals therefore, Socrates is mortal, conclusion. Validity versus truth. Aristotle meticulously analyzed the form of arguments, distinguishing between valid arguments, where the conclusion necessarily follows from premises, and true arguments, where the premises themselves are true. A valid argument can have false premises, but a sound argument must be both valid and have true premises. Categories. His work on categories, substance, quantity, quality, relation, etc., provided a framework for classifying entities and predication. Logic as a tool, organon. Aristotle considered logic not as a science in itself, but as a tool or instrument essential for all sciences. It provides a framework for correct thinking and sound argumentation, ensuring intellectual rigor. Foundations of the scientific method. While not formulating the modern scientific method as we know it, Aristotle's approach contained crucial elements. Observation, meticulous collection of data from the natural world. Classification, organizing observed phenomena into categories. Induction, moving from particular observations to general principles. Deduction, using general principles like syllogisms to explain particular phenomena or derive new conclusions. His emphasis on teleology, purpose, or final cause, in nature, e.g., an acorn's purpose is to become an oak, was also a defining characteristic of his scientific thought, differing from later mechanistic views. 5.4 Nicomachean Ethics. Virtue, happiness, and the golden mean. Ethics as a practical science. For Aristotle, ethics was not about abstract ideals, like Plato's form of the good, but about how humans should live to achieve human flourishing, eudaimonia. The pursuit of happiness, eudaimonia, not mere pleasure. Eudaimonia is often translated as happiness, but it means something closer to flourishing, living well, or having a good spirit. It is the ultimate goal of human life. Activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. Eudaimonia is achieved through the active exercise of our distinctively human capacities, reason, in a virtuous way over complete life. Virtue ethics. Aristotle's ethics is primarily a virtue ethics, focusing on the character of the moral agent rather than specific rules or consequences of actions. Moral virtues, developed through habit and practice. These include courage, temperance, generosity, honesty, justice, etc. Intellectual virtues, acquired through teaching and experience. These include theoretical wisdom, Sophia, and practical wisdom, Phronesis. The doctrine of the golden mean, Mesotes. Virtue as a middle ground, a key concept. Moral virtue is a mean between two vices, one of excess and one of deficiency, not a mathematical mean. It is relative to the individual and the situation, requiring practical wisdom, Phronesis, to discern the right action. Examples: courage is a mean between cowardice, deficiency, and rashness, excess. Generosity is the mean between stinginess, deficiency, and prodigality, excess. Temperance is a mean between insensibility, deficiency, and self-indulgence, excess. The role of practical wisdom, Phronesis, this intellectual virtue, is crucial for ethical action. It is the ability to deliberate well about what is good for humans and to apply general ethical principles to specific situations. It's a practical intelligence that guides moral choice. Friendship. Philia. Aristotle considered philia an essential component of the good life, distinguishing between friendships of utility, pleasure, and perfect friendship based on shared virtue. 5.5 Politics. The human as a political animal. The connection between ethics and politics. For Aristotle, ethics naturally flows into politics. The good life of the individual can only be fully realized within a well-ordered community. Man is by nature a zoon politikon, political animal. This famous statement underscores that humans are inherently social beings, whose nature is fulfilled only by living in a polis, city-state. The polis is the highest form of community, necessary for human flourishing, as it allows for the development of reason and virtue. Analysis of constitutions and forms of government. Aristotle conducted an extensive empirical study of over 158 actual constitutions of Greek city-states, most of which are lost. He classified governments based on who rules, one, few, many, and whether they rule in the common interest or their own interest. Good forms, ruling in common interest. Monarchy, rule by one virtuous king. Aristocracy, rule by the virtuous few, the best. Polity, rule by the many, a moderate form of democracy, mixture of oligarchy and democracy, focused on the middle class. Degenerate forms, ruling in self-interest. Tyranny, degeneration of monarchy. Oligarchy, degeneration of aristocracy, rule by the wealthy. Democracy, degeneration of polity, rule by the poor, mob rule. The preference for polity. While recognizing the theoretical superiority of monarchy or aristocracy, if truly virtuous, Aristotle pragmatically preferred polity for most real-world states. He believed it provided the most stable and achievable form of government, avoiding the extremes of tyranny and mob rule, and relying on a strong middle class. The importance of law and education. Good laws and a robust educational system are crucial for shaping virtuous citizens and maintaining a just state. 5.6 The Lyceum and Aristotle's enduring influence. Foundation of the Lyceum. Upon his return to Athens around 335 BCE, Aristotle established his own school, the Lyceum, named after the temple of Apollo Lyceus. His school was also known as the Peripatetic School, from peripatos, walking place, as he often taught while walking around the Lyceum's shaded walkways. Research and collection. The Lyceum placed a strong emphasis on empirical research and the systematic collection of data. It famously housed a vast library and collections of biological specimens. Students engaged in collaborative research projects in various fields, much like a modern research institution. Aristotle's writings. Unlike Plato's polished dialogues, many of Aristotle's surviving works are thought to be lecture notes or treatises compiled by his students. They are dense, systematic, and often laconic. His vast corpus covers virtually every field of knowledge. Influence on Western thought. Medieval scholasticism. Aristotle's logical and metaphysical works were central to Christian, Islamic, and Jewish philosophy in the Middle Ages. Thomas Aquinas integrated Aristotelian philosophy into Catholic theology, making Aristotle's ideas foundational for centuries. The scientific revolution. While some of the scientific theories, e.g. geocentrism elements, were later overturned, his emphasis on observation, classification, and systematic reasoning provided the methodological bedrock for the scientific revolution. Scientists like Galileo, while challenging his physics, built upon his empirical spirit. Logic. His logic remained virtually unchallenged as a dominant system of reasoning until the 19th century. Ethics and politics. His concepts of eudaimonia, the golden mean, and the political animal continue to inform contemporary discussions in virtue ethics and political theory. Biology. His detailed observations and classifications made him a pioneer in the field. The death of Aristotle marked not only the end of an intellectual era, but also coincided with a dramatic shift in the geopolitical landscape of the ancient world. The independent Greek city-states, the vibrant polis that had been the crucible of classical Greek thought, were now eclipsed by the vast, sprawling empire forged by Alexander the Great. His conquests, from Greece to India, dissolved the traditional boundaries of the familiar world, ushering in the Hellenistic age. This was a period of immense cultural diffusion, but also one profound change, instability, and a sense of individual powerlessness in the face of colossal empires. The grand, systematic philosophies of Plato and Aristotle, while still revered, no longer seem to offer immediate solace or practical guidance for individuals grappling with a rapidly expanding and often bewildering world. In response to this new reality, philosophy took a distinctly practical turn. No longer primarily concerned with the ideal state or abstract metaphysical truths, the focus shifted to the individual's quest for tranquility, inner peace, and a guide for living well in uncertain times. This chapter explores the major Hellenistic schools of thought: Stoicism, Epicureanism, and Skepticism, each offering a unique path to happiness, eudaimonia, and a practical philosophy for navigating life's inevitable challenges, transforming philosophy into a vital tool for personal well-being. 6.1 The historical context. From Alexander to the Roman Empire, the dissolution of the polis. Classical Greek philosophy was deeply intertwined with the concept of the city-state, polis. For Plato and Aristotle, human flourishing was inextricably linked to participation in a well-ordered, self-governing community. Alexander's conquests, 336 to 323 BCE, fundamentally altered this. The polis lost its political autonomy and became part of larger empires. First Alexander's, then the successor kingdoms, Ptolemaic Egypt, Seleucid Empire, and Aegonid Macedonia. This shift led to a sense of disenfranchisement and a diminished role for the average citizen in public life. The locus of power was now far removed from the local community, a world of cosmopolitanism and instability. Alexander's empire fostered cosmopolitanism, breaking down barriers between Greeks and barbarians. Greek culture and language spread, but individuals often felt like small cogs in a vast, impersonal machine. The period following Alexander's death was marked by frequent wars among his generals, the Diadochi, leading to political instability, uncertainty, and widespread anxiety. New economic realities, increased travel, and cultural mixing meant individuals were exposed to diverse customs and beliefs, sometimes leading to a questioning of traditional values. The rise of individualism. In a world where political action seemed less impactful, individuals sought personal autonomy and inner peace. Philosophy became less about reforming the state and more about fortifying the self. The central question shifted from what is the best form of government to how can I live a good, happy, and tranquil life? This paved the way for philosophies that offered practical strategies for navigating personal adversity and achieving inner serenity, regardless of external circumstances. 6.2 Stoicism, Virtue, Acceptance, and Emotional Control, Origins and Key Figures. Founded in Athens around 300 BCE by Zeno of Citium, who taught in the Stoa-Poikile painted porch, giving the school its name. Flourished in three main phases: early Stoa, Zeno, Cleanthes Chrysippus; middle Stoa, Panetius, Posidonius; and late Stoa, Roman Stoicism, which is most familiar due to its accessible writings. Prominent Roman Stoics: Seneca, advisor to Nero; Epictetus, a former slave; and Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor. Their writings, letters from a Stoic, discourses, meditations, are highly influential and practical. Core tenets of Stoicism: the universe is rational and governed by logos, divine reason/providence. The cosmos is an ordered, rational whole, permeated by a divine, active force. Everything that happens is part of a rational plan. Accepting this divine order is fundamental to Stoic tranquility. What is fated is what is reasonable. distinction between things in our control and things not in our control. This is a cornerstone of Stoic practice. In our control, our opinions, judgments, desires, aversion, and actions are volitions. Not in our control, external events, other people's actions, our body, health, reputation, wealth, death. The goal is to focus all our efforts and emotional energy on what is within our control and to accept with equanimity everything else. Virtue is the only good. True good lies only in virtue, wisdom, justice, courage, temperance. These are internal states of character. External things, health, wealth, pleasure, reputation, are indifference, adiaphora. While some are preferred indifference, like health, they are never good in themselves and don't contribute to eudaimonia. Vice is the only evil. The goal, apatheia, freedom from disturbing passions. Not apathy in the modern sense, lack of feeling, but freedom from irrational and unhealthy emotions, passions like excessive fear, grief, anger, pleasure. These passions arise from faulty judgments about what is good or bad, e.g., believing wealth is good or death is evil. Through reason and disciplined thought, one can cultivate appropriate emotions and a serene mind. Practical Stoic exercises. Premeditation of evils. Premeditatio malorum, mentally prepare for potential misfortunes, poverty, illness, death, to diminish their emotional impact when they occur. Negative visualization. Imagine losing what you value to appreciate it more and reduce fear of loss. Journaling/self-reflection. Daily examination of one's judgment and actions, as exemplified by Marcus Aurelius. Indifference to externals. Practicing detachment from outcomes and external opinions. Living according to nature, aligning one's reason with the rational order of the universe. Acting virtuously. Stoicism's appeal in troubled times. Offer robust framework for resilience and inner strength in a world of political upheaval and personal vulnerability. Provided a sense of control by emphasizing what truly matters, our judgments and character, even when external circumstances are dire. Its universalistic and rational approach appealed to diverse people across the Roman Empire, from slaves to emperors. 6.3 Epicureanism, pleasure, friendship, and the pursuit of ataraxia. Origins and key figures. Founded by Epicurus, 341 to 270 BCE, in Athens, who established a community known as the Garden, known for its inclusivity, welcoming women and slaves, a radical departure from many ancient schools. Core tenets of Epicureanism. Philosophy as a fourfold cure, tetrapharmakos. Don't fear God. The gods exist, but don't interfere with. Don't worry about death. When we exist, death is not. When death exists, we are not. What is good is easy to get pleasure. What is terrible is easy to endure pain. The goal, pleasure, hedon as the highest good. Misunderstood concept, often misinterpreted as hedonism, sensual indulgence. For Epicurus, pleasure was primarily the absence of pain in the body, aponia, and the absence of disturbance in the soul, ataraxia. Types of pleasure. Kinetic, moving pleasures. Active, intense, but transient, e.g., eating when hungry. Katastematic, static pleasures. Stable, lasting pleasures of contentment, tranquility, and freedom from discomfort. These are the true goal. He advocated for a moderate, simple life, avoiding excesses that lead to pain or anxiety. A materialistic worldview, atomism, adopted the atomistic theory of Democritus. The universe consists of atoms moving in the void. This worldview aimed to eliminate fear of the gods and the afterlife, as there was no divine intervention or eternal punishment. The soul disperses into atoms upon death. The importance of friendship and community. Epicurus believed that friendship, philia, was one of the greatest sources of stable pleasure and security. The Garden was a close-knit community where friends supported each other in pursuit of philosophical understanding and tranquility. He famously advised withdrawal from public life politics, as it often brought more trouble than tranquility. Practical Epicurean advice. Simple living. Cultivate contentment with basic necessities, as elaborate desires lead to frustration. Prudent calculation of pleasures. Weigh short-term pleasures against long-term consequences. Cultivation of inner peace. Focus on mental tranquility over intense physical pleasure. Reflection on death. Understanding death as the end of sensation to remove its terror. Epicureanism's appeal in troubled times offered a path to personal contentment and escape from anxiety in a chaotic world. Its emphasis on modest pleasures and the strong bond of friendship provided a haven for individuals disillusioned with public life or overwhelmed by imperial scales. 6.4 Skepticism. The suspension of judgment and tranquility, epiche. Origins and key figures. Pyrrho of Elis, c. 360 to 270 BC, often considered the first skeptic, though his ideas are known primarily through his student Timon. He sought freedom from disturbance, ataraxia, by refusing to assert dogmatic beliefs about the ultimate nature of reality. Academic skepticism, developed in Plato's academy after his death, particularly under Arcesilaus and Carneades. They argued that certain knowledge was impossible, therefore suspension of judgment was a proper attitude. Pyrrhonian skepticism, revived by Anisidemus and later systematized by Sextus Empiricus, 2nd to 3rd century CE, whose writings are our primary source for ancient skepticism. Core tenets of skepticism. The impossibility of certain knowledge. Skeptics argued that for every assertion, an equally plausible counter-assertion could be made, equipoise. They highlighted the unreliability of senses, the fallibility of reason, and the relativity of human experience, e.g., different cultures, different perspectives. There's no objective criterion to decide between conflicting claims, especially about non-evident matters, like the nature of ultimate reality or the gods. The goal, epiche, suspension of judgment. Since no certain knowledge can be attained, the wisest course of action is to suspend judgment on all non-evident matters. This is not about denying what appears to be true, but about withholding assent to dogmatic claims. This suspension of judgment leads directly to tranquility, ataraxia. Tranquility, ataraxia, as the outcome. The skeptics argue that much of human suffering comes from clinging to dogmatic beliefs and being disturbed when those beliefs are challenged or when reality doesn't conform to them. By suspending judgment, one is liberated from the anxiety of being wrong, the frustration of inconclusive arguments, and the fear of the unknown. Practical living for a skeptic. Skeptics did not advocate for total inaction or paralysis. They lived according to appearances and common sense, following customs, laws, and natural inclinations for practical living, without committing to any dogmatic belief about their ultimate truth. One could still act morally, for example, based on conventional notions of right and wrong, while reserving judgment on their absolute validity. Skepticism's appeal in troubled times offer profound liberation from intellectual anxiety and the endless disputes of dogmatic philosophy. In a pluralistic world with many conflicting belief systems, skepticism provided a path to peace by embracing the limits of human knowledge. It allowed individuals to navigate complex social realities without the burden of absolute certainty. 6.5 How these philosophies offered practical answers for life. Responding to a changed world. The Hellenistic schools emerged precisely because the old frameworks no longer fully addressed the individual's existential needs. They provided highly individualized and actionable philosophies. Unlike classical philosophy, which often sought to transform the state, these schools aimed to transform the individual's inner life, enabling them to find happiness regardless of external political or social conditions. Focus on eudaimonia, well-being. While their definitions of eudaimonia differed, virtue for Stoics, tranquility for Epicureans and skeptics, all three shared the common goal of guiding individuals toward fulfilling an undisturbed life. Emphasis on self-sufficiency and inner resources. Each school, in its own way, stressed the importance of relying on one's own internal resources, reason, judgment, detachment, rather than external factors for happiness. This message resonated deeply in an age where external control seemed increasingly elusive. Therapeutic role of philosophy. Philosophy was viewed as a medicine for the soul, offering remedies for fear, anxiety, grief, and other emotional disturbances. It provided a roadmap for daily living, a set of principles and practices to navigate ethical dilemmas, personal setbacks, and the unpredictability of life. Influence on later thought. These schools, particularly Stoicism and Epicureanism, had a profound impact on Roman thought, shaping the ethical outlook of leading figures like Cicero, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius. Their ideas, especially Stoicism, would later influence early Christian thought and continue to resonate in modern psychology, e.g., cognitive behavioral therapies focus on changing irrational belief when ideas travel. The history of empires is not just a tale of military might and territorial expansion. It is also a narrative of cultural exchange, absorption, and transformation. As the Roman Republic and later the Roman Empire expanded its dominion across the Mediterranean, it inevitably encountered, conquered, and was profoundly influenced by the rich intellectual legacy of Greece. While Rome brought its formidable engineering, legal systems, and military discipline, Greece, despite its political subjugation, exerted a powerful conquest of its own, a conquest of the mind. This chapter explores how Greek philosophy, particularly the practical, individual-focused schools of the Hellenistic period, traveled to Rome, was eagerly embraced by Roman intellectuals and leaders, and underwent a fascinating adaptation that shaped Roman thought, and by extension, the trajectory of Western civilization. 7.1 Rome's conquest of Greece, and Greece's cultural conquest of Rome. The military and political annexation. Rome's expansion into the Greek world began in the 3rd century BCE, driven by a mix of political maneuvering, economic interests, and a need to secure its eastern borders. Key events include the Punic Wars, which freed up Roman resources for eastward expansion, and the Macedonian Wars, ended with the Battle of Pydna in 168 BCE, effectively bringing Macedon under Roman control. The sacking of Corinth in 146 BCE marked a definitive moment, leading to the formal annexation of Greece as a Roman province. This year is often seen as the end of Greek political independence. Implications for Greeks. While they lost political freedom, many Greek cities retained their cultural institutions, and Greek language and education remained vibrant. However, the ultimate authority now lay with Rome. The conquest of Roman minds. Graecia captiferum victorum cepit. This famous line by Horace, "Captive Greece took captive her savage conqueror," perfectly encapsulates the cultural dynamic. Roman admiration for Greek culture. From the early Republic, elite Romans had a deep, almost reverential respect for Greek art, literature, rhetoric, and philosophy. They recognized Greece as a fount of high culture and intellectual sophistication. Greek tutors in education. It became fashionable, almost mandatory, for wealthy Roman families to employ Greek tutors for their children. Young Romans traveled to Athens and Rhodes to study rhetoric and philosophy in Greek schools. Importation of Greek scholars and texts. Greek philosophers, teachers, artists, and architects flocked to Rome, sometimes as slaves, sometimes as honored guests, bringing their ideas and knowledge with them. Vast libraries of Greek texts were amassed in Rome. Why Rome embraced Greek philosophy? Practicality. Unlike the speculative cosmological focus of early Greek philosophy, the Hellenistic schools, Stoicism, Epicureanism, skepticism, offered practical wisdom for living, which appealed strongly to the pragmatic Roman temperament. Romans were less interested in abstract metaphysics for its own sake, and more in what could improve character, decision-making, and public service. Ethical guidance. As the Republic grew and faced internal turmoil and vast responsibilities, Roman leaders sought ethical frameworks to guide personal conduct, civic duty, and the challenges of power. Greek ethics provided comprehensive answers. Rhetoric and argumentation. Greek philosophy also provided sophisticated tools for rhetoric and logical argumentation, essential skills for Roman politicians, lawyers, and administrators. Universalism. The universalistic outlook of Stoicism, in particular, resonated with Rome's burgeoning empire, which encompassed diverse peoples and cultures. It offered a common ethical ground for all humanity. 7.2 Cicero, the great popularizer of Greek philosophy in Rome. A quintessential Roman intellectual, Marcus Tullius Cicero, 106 to 43 BCE, was arguably the most influential Roman orator, statesman, lawyer, and philosopher of the late Roman Republic. He lived through the tumultuous civil wars that ended the Republic. Fluent in Greek, he studied philosophy in Athens and Rhodes under leading Hellenistic teachers. His philosophical project, Bridging Greek and Roman Thought. Cicero's primary aim was not to create original philosophical systems, but to translate, explain, and popularize Greek philosophy for a Roman audience, make it accessible and relevant in Latin. He saw philosophy as vital for cultivating virtuous citizens and effective public servants. For him, Philosophical knowledge was inextricably linked to civic duty officium, eclecticism, and the academic skeptic influence. Cicero did not adhere strictly to one school but was an eclectic, drawing insights from Stoicism, Epicureanism, the Peripatetics, Aristotelians, and most notably, the academic skeptics. His skepticism, derived from his time in the academy, led him to believe that definitive knowledge of ultimate truths was difficult, if not impossible. Thus, he critically examined various philosophical doctrines without committing to any single one. This critical, comparative approach made him an excellent expositor of different viewpoints. Key philosophical works and contributions. De Finibus Bonorum et Malorum, On the Ends of Good and Evil, explores the highest good according to Epicurean, Stoic, and academic views. Tusculan Disputations addresses ethical questions like pain, death, grief, and emotional disturbance from a philosophical perspective. De Officiis, on Duty, is a highly influential work on moral conduct and civic duty, drawing heavily on Stoic principles, outlining virtues like honesty, justice, and benevolence. It profoundly influenced Christian ethics and Renaissance humanism. De Natura Deorum, on the nature of the gods, presents a Stoic, Epicurean, and academic skeptic views on theology. Cicero's legacy. His prolific writings created a philosophical Latin vocabulary, enabling abstract Greek concepts to be discussed precisely in Latin. This was crucial for the transmission of Greek thought to subsequent Latin-speaking generations, including early Christian thinkers. He instilled in Roman elites the idea that engagement with philosophy was a mark of a cultivated and responsible citizen. His emphasis on officium, duty, became a cornerstone of Roman moral thought. 7.3 Seneca, Practical Stoicism for Roman Life. A leading figure of Roman Stoicism, Lucius Annaeus Seneca, c. for BCE 65 CE, was a prominent Roman Stoic philosopher, statesman, dramatist, and imperial advisor to Emperor Nero. Though his life was one of immense personal and political drama, including exile, wealth, power, and forced suicide. This gave his philosophy a raw, lived authenticity. Focus on practical application. Seneca's philosophy is characterized by its intense practicality. He was less interested in theoretical debates or grand metaphysical systems, and more concerned with how Stoic principles could be applied to daily life to achieve tranquility and resilience. His writings are deeply personal and confessional, often addressing specific emotional and ethical challenges. Key Stoic themes in Seneca's work. De Providentia, on providence, argues that misfortunes are not punishments but opportunities for the virtuous to test and strengthen their character, consistent with divine reason. Adversity is the virtue's opportunity. De Brevitate Vitae, on the shortness of life, contends that life is not short, but we waste much of it on trivial pursuits. True living involves philosophical reflection and self-mastery. Epistulae Moralis ad Lucilium, Moral Letters to Lucilius, a collection of 124 letters that are a masterclass in practical philosophy. Each letter addresses a specific ethical problem or Stoic concept, offering concrete advice for overcoming fear, anger, grief, desire, and cultivating virtue. Control over impressions emphasizes that our emotional reactions are based on our judgments, not the events themselves. Living in the present. Focus on the now, letting go of anxieties about the past or future. Voluntary poverty/simplicity, practicing living with less to reduce dependence on externals. The sage is ideal, though unattainable. The ideal Stoic sage serves as a guide for self-improvement. The brotherhood of humanity. Seneca, like other Stoics, emphasized the concept of cosmic citizenship and the moral obligation to treat all humans, including slaves, with respect, reflecting the underlying logos in all. Seneca's enduring appeal. His direct, powerful, and often eloquent prose made Stoicism accessible. His personal struggles and ultimate fate lent credibility to his philosophy, showing that he lived his principles even in extreme circumstances. He remains a foundational figure in Stoic thought and a source of wisdom for navigating personal crises. 7.4 Marcus Aurelius, an emperor-philosopher of Stoicism. The unlikely philosopher. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Augustus, 121 to 180 CE, was one of the 5 good emperors of Rome and is unique for being a reigning emperor who was also a dedicated Stoic philosopher. His reign was marked by constant external threats, wars on the frontiers, plagues, and internal challenges, making his philosophical commitment all the more remarkable. Meditations, Ta Ayashyutin, to himself. This deeply personal work is not a formal philosophical treatise, but a series of private reflections, aphorisms, and spiritual exercises written by Marcus Aurelius to himself, primarily during military campaigns. It offers an unparalleled glimpse into the mind of a leader grappling with immense power and responsibility through the lens of Stoicism. Key themes in Meditations: acceptance of fate. A more fatty everything that happens is part of the rational order of the universe and is for the greater good. Embrace it, do not resist it. The transience of life and glory, constant reminder of mortality and the insignificance of worldly fame. All is ephemeral, fame and the famous. The importance of inner citadel. Cultivate an unshakable inner calm, a citadel that external events cannot breach. Duty and public service. Despite the personal focus, Marcus Aurelius firmly believed in his duty to serve humanity and the state, acting justly and rationally. The discipline of assent. Carefully scrutinize one's perceptions and judgments to avoid faulty beliefs that lead to emotional disturbance. Cosmic perspective. Viewing one's life and problems from the perspective of the entire cosmos to gain proportion and detachment. Living in accordance with nature and reason. Aligning one's actions with the universal logos and one's own rational nature. Marcus Aurelius' legacy. His Meditations are one of the most beloved and accessible works of Stoic philosophy, widely read for its timeless wisdom on resilience, duty, and finding peace in a challenging world. He represents the ideal of the philosopher king, or at least philosopher emperor, in practice, demonstrating that deep philosophical reflection is compatible with and perhaps essential for effective and ethical leadership. 7.5 The adaptation and transformation of Greek ideas in Rome. Pragmatism over speculation. Romans generally favored the practical, ethical, and political aspects of Greek philosophy over its more abstract metaphysical or cosmological inquiries. They were less interested in debating the exact nature of Plato's forms or Aristotle's unmoved mover, and more interested in how philosophy could help them live well and govern effectively. Emphasis on virtus and gravitas. Roman interpretation of Greek virtues often aligned with their own cultural values of virtus, manliness, courage, excellence in public life, and gravitas, seriousness, dignity, a sense of responsibility. Stoicism, with its emphasis on duty, self-control, and resilience in adversity, resonated perfectly with these Roman ideals. Latinization and dissemination. The translation and explanation efforts of figures like Cicero were crucial. By rendering Greek philosophical concepts into Latin, they broadened the audience beyond Greek speakers and allowed Roman culture to absorb these ideas deeply. While many Roman philosophers, like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, still engaged deeply with Greek texts, their own writings often present the ideas in a more accessible, less academic, and more rhetorical style. Syncretism and eclecticism. Roman thinkers often did not adhere rigidly to a single school, but synthesized elements from different philosophies. As seen with Cicero, eclecticism was common. Even within a school like Stoicism, Roman Stoics, e.g. Seneca, brought their own perspectives, often focusing more on personal ethics and less on the physics or logic of the earlier Greek Stoics. Philosophy for the ruling elite. While Hellenistic philosophies aimed for broader individual appeal, in Rome, philosophical education was primarily for the elite. These individuals used philosophy to navigate the complexities of power, wealth, and public service. The shift towards inner life and personal salvation. The decline of the Republic and the rise of the Empire intensified the sense of individual isolation and vulnerability, further cementing the Hellenistic turn towards personal tranquility rather than civic flourishing as the primary philosophical goal. This emphasis on inner peace and the virtuous individual would later create fertile ground for the reception of Christian thought, which also promised inner conclusion to the chapter, transition to Neoplatonism/Christianity. The encounter between Greek philosophy and Roman power was a testament to the enduring influence of ideas. What began as a military conquest transformed into a profound cultural absorption as Rome adopted and adapted the intellectual treasures of Greece. Figures like Cicero, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius did not merely passively receive Greek thought, they actively reshaped it. prioritizing its practical wisdom, ethical guidance, and tools for personal resilience to suit the demands of Roman life and leadership. This process of translation, interpretation, and application ensured that the profound insights of the Hellenistic schools, particularly Stoicism, found a fertile new home and reached an even wider audience, laying the intellectual groundwork for centuries to come. As the Roman Empire expanded, and as classical paganism began to wane, Greek philosophy, particularly in its later forms, would continue to evolve, eventually forming a bridge to new spiritual and intellectual landscapes, most notably the burgeoning phenomenon of Christianity, the last great ancient philosophical school. As the Roman Empire moved into its later centuries, the intellectual landscape of the classical world began to shift once more. The pragmatic, individual-focused philosophies of the Hellenistic schools, while influential, lacked the grand metaphysical sweep that had characterized the golden age of Plato and Aristotle. In a world increasingly looking for spiritual solace and a deeper connection to the divine, a powerful new philosophical synthesis emerged: Neoplatonism. This wasn't merely a revival of Plato's ideas. It was a profound reinterpretation and expansion of his philosophy, particularly his theory of forms, blending it with elements of other Greek traditions to create a complex, mystical system. Neoplatonism will become the last major flowering of pagan philosophy in antiquity, and crucially, it would serve as an indispensable intellectual bridge between the classical Greek world and the nascent, burgeoning force of Christianity, shaping early Christian theology in ways that continue to resonate today. 8.1 Plotinus and the renewal of Platonism, the context of late antiquity. By the 3rd century CE, the Roman Empire was facing immense challenges: political instability, economic crises, barbarian invasions, and the rise of new religious movements, including mystery cults and, most significantly, Christianity. There was a growing sense of spiritual yearning and a desire for philosophical systems that offered not just ethical guidance, but a path to salvation or union with the divine. Classical paganism was in decline, and its intellectual defenses needed bolstering against the powerful arguments of the rapidly spreading Christian faith. Plotinus, c. 204/5, 270 CE, the founder. Born in Egypt, Plotinus studied in Alexandria, a vibrant intellectual melting pot, before moving to Rome in 244 CE. He established a philosophical school in Rome that attracted many students, including senators and nobles. His teachings, collected and edited posthumously by his student Porphyry into the Enneads, meaning nines, grouped into 6 sets of 9 treatises, formed the core text of Neoplatonism. Plotinus saw himself not as an innovator, but as a faithful interpreter of Plato, seeking to reveal the deeper, mystical meaning within Plato's dialogues. He sought to demonstrate the systematic unity of Plato's thought, the problem Plotinus addressed. While Plato had posited the world of forms, there was still a perceived gap between this perfect, unchanging realm and the imperfect, changing, sensible world. How did the many derive from the one? How could the divine interact with the material? Plotinus sought to explain the emanation of all reality from a single, ultimate source, providing a unified cosmological and metaphysical system that accounted for both the spiritual and material realms. 8.2 The hierarchy of being, the one, the intellect, and the soul. Plotinus conceived reality as a series of successive emanations or hypostases, fundamental substances, flowing outward from an utterly simple, transcendent, and ineffable first principle. This hierarchy explained the existence of all things without diminishing perfection of the ultimate source, the One, to hen the ultimate reality. Beyond being and thought, the One is the ultimate, absolute first principle of everything. It is utterly transcendent, beyond all categories of thought and being. It cannot be described or known directly, only experienced through mystical union. Simple and undifferentiated, it is perfectly unified, without parts, attributes, or distinctions. It is the source of all unity and goodness in the cosmos. Overflowing goodness, emanation, not creation. The One overflows or radiates its perfection, not through a conscious act of creation, but like light emanating from the sun. This emanation is a natural and necessary consequence of its perfect fullness. It loses nothing by giving forth. The goal of return, the ultimate goal for the human soul, is to ascend back to and achieve mystical union with the One. The intellect nous the world of forms. First emanation from the One. The intellect or divine mind is the first, immediate emanation from the One. It is the realm of pure thought and contains within itself all the Platonic forms, ideas. Perfect and unified multiplicity, unlike the absolute unity of the One. The intellect contains a multiplicity, the forms, but these forms are unified in a perfect, eternal, and intelligible way. It is the realm of perfect universal concepts and archetypes. Self-contemplation. The intellect contemplates the One, its source, and, in doing so, contemplates itself and all the forms contained within it. This self-contemplation constitutes its perfect activity. The soul, psyche universal and individual. Second emanation from the intellect. The soul is the third hypostasis, emanating from the intellect. It acts as an intermediary between the intelligible realm and the sensible material world. Two aspects. Higher soul, universal soul, always contemplates the intellect and maintains its connection to the divine. Lower soul, individual soul/nature descends into material world, giving form and life to bodies. It is responsible for the generation and organization of the physical cosmos, the source of life and movement. The soul is the animating principle of the universe, responsible for time, change, and the diversity of the natural world. Fall and return. Individual human souls are part of the universal soul, but in becoming enfleshed they fall or become distracted by the material world. The philosophical and spiritual journey is one of purification, and ascent back through the intellect to the One. Matter, how the lowest level. Matter is not a separate hypostasis, but the final indeterminate trace or boundary of the soul's emanation. It is the lowest level of being, furthest from the One, and associated with privation, darkness, and imperfection. However, it is not inherently evil. Evil results from the soul's attachment to matter and its turning away from higher principles. The ascent of the soul mystical union. Plotinus' philosophy offers a path to spiritual liberation and mystical union, hypnosis, with the One. This ascent involves stages of purification, moral virtues, purifying the lower soul from attachment to bodily desires and passions. Contemplation of beauty. Moving from physical beauty to the forms of beauty. Contemplation of the intellect. Understanding the realm of universal forms through reason. Ecstasy and union with the One. Transcending reason and self, achieving a direct, ineffable experience of the ultimate unity. This is a rare and fleeting experience. 8.3 Augustine of Hippo, Christianity and Platonic Philosophy. The historical context of Augustine. A world in transition. Augustine, 354 to 430 CE, lived during a period of profound upheaval, the decline of the Western Roman Empire and the dramatic ascendance of Christianity. Intellectual and spiritual seeker. Before his conversion, Augustine explored various philosophical and religious traditions, including Manichaeism, a dualistic religion, skepticism, and crucially, Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism as a pathway to Christianity. Liberation from Manichaeism. Neoplatonism provided Augustine with crucial intellectual tools to overcome the Manichaean problem of evil, where evil was a separate, active force. Neoplatonism taught him that evil is not a substance but privation of good, a turning away from the higher levels of being. This reconciled him with the idea of a good God as the sole creator. Concept of a non-material God. Neoplatonism accustomed Augustine to the idea of a non-material, transcendent ultimate reality, the One, which made the Christian concept of God as pure spirit much more comprehensible and appealing than the anthropomorphic deities of paganism or the materialist conceptions of other schools. The soul's ascent. The Neoplatonic emphasis on the soul's journey inward and upward toward the divine resonated strongly with Christian spiritual aspirations. The hierarchy of being and divine ideas. Plotinus' intellect, containing the forms, provided a philosophical framework for understanding God's mind as the locus of eternal divine ideas, archetypes of creation, which influenced Augustine's understanding of God's creative act and divine providence. Distinction between sensory and intellectual knowledge. The Neoplatonic distinction between the unreliable sensible world and the knowable intelligible world aligned with the Christian emphasis on spiritual truth over worldly experience. Augustine's Christianization of Neoplatonism. While deeply influenced, Augustine did not simply adopt Neoplatonism. He transformed it to fit Christian doctrine. The One becomes God. Plotinus' impersonal one is replaced by the personal, loving, and creating God of the Bible. Intellect becomes a logos/Christ. The intellect realm of forms is often identified with the logos, word of God, specifically Jesus Christ, who is the divine reason and illumination by which humans understand truth. Emanation becomes creation ex nihilo. Plotinus' eternal emanation is replaced by God's creation of the world ex nihilo, out of nothing, a distinct act of will, not a necessary outflow. Grace and redemption. While Neoplatonism offered a path to union through intellectual and moral effort, Christianity emphasized the necessity of divine grace and the role of Christ's redemption for salvation. Human reason alone, tainted by original sin, cannot achieve ultimate union without God's help. The problem of evil. While accepting evil as privation, Augustine also strongly emphasized the human will and its turning away from God as the source of moral evil, a concept more prominent than in Plotinus. 8.4 How Neoplatonism influenced medieval Christian thought. The primary conduit for Greek philosophy. For much of the early and high Middle Ages in the West, knowledge of Plato and other Greek philosophers was largely mediated through Neoplatonic interpretations, often preserved and transmitted by Christian thinkers like Augustine and Boethius. Impact on theology and metaphysics. God's transcendence and immateriality. Neoplatonism reinforced the concept of God as utterly transcendent, simple, and immaterial, influencing theological definitions. Divine illumination theory. Augustine's epistemology, arguing that human reason is illuminated by God's truth to grasp eternal verities, like mathematical truths or moral principles, directly stems from a Neoplatonic idea of the intellect illuminating the soul. The problem of universals. The Neoplatonic understanding of forms, as existing in the divine mind, became a crucial part of the medieval debate on universals, e.g., humanity versus individual humans. Hierarchy of being. The Neoplatonic hierarchical emanation influenced medieval cosmology and angelology, creating a graded universe with God at the apex, descending through spiritual beings to the material world. Influence on mysticism. The Neoplatonic concept of mystical ascent to union with the One provided a philosophical framework and vocabulary for Christian mystical traditions, seeking direct experience of God. Figures like Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, heavily influenced by Neoplatonism, were pivotal in shaping medieval Christian mysticism. Ethics in the good life. Neoplatonism's emphasis on purifying the soul from material attachments and striving for intellectual and spiritual virtues resonated with Christian ascetic ideals and the pursuit of holiness. Challenges and tensions. Despite the strong influence, tensions remained. The Christian doctrine of the incarnation, God becoming man, and the resurrection of the body were difficult to reconcile with Neoplatonism's tendency to devalue the material world and the body. The emphasis on grace and faith in Christianity also contrasted with Neoplatonism's focus on intellectual ascent. With the reintroduction of Aristotle's works into the West in the 12th and 13th centuries via error translations, scholastic philosophers like Thomas Aquinas would begin to challenge the pervasive Neoplatonic framework, integrating Aristotelian realism and empiricism into Christian thought. 8.5 The end of ancient philosophy and the beginning of a new era. The closing of the Academy. In 529 CE, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I officially closed the Neoplatonic Academy in Athens, often cited as a symbolic end to classical pagan philosophy. This act reflected the triumph of Christianity as the dominant intellectual and spiritual force in the Roman world. Transformation, not annihilation. While ancient Greek philosophy as an independent, pagan enterprise ceased to be a primary force, its ideas did not disappear. Instead, they were absorbed, adapted, and reinterpreted within the new intellectual framework of Christian theology. Neoplatonism, in particular, provided the philosophical concepts and language that allowed early Christian thinkers to articulate complex theological doctrines in a sophisticated manner, making Christianity intellectually defensible and appealing to educated pagans. Seeds of future thought. The debates ignited by Neoplatonism's influence on Christianity, e.g., the nature of God, the problem of evil, the soul's destiny, would continue to shape medieval scholasticism. The very questions and methods established by the Greeks, even when recontextualized, will remain foundational for Western intellectual inquiry. The dawn of the medieval age. The shift from classical antiquity to the Middle Ages was not a sudden break, but a gradual process of cultural and intellectual transformation. The legacy of Greek philosophy, heavily filtered through Neoplatonic lenses, continued to underpin much of this new era's intellectual endeavors, waiting for its full rediscovery and reevaluation centuries later. How Greek ideas shaped the West. The intellectual journey from the bustling Athenian agora to the Roman imperial court, and then through the Christianized lens of late antiquity, reveals a continuous, evolving dialogue with the foundational ideas of Greek philosophy. While the direct flourishing of ancient Greek thought concluded with the rise of the Middle Ages, its influence was far from over. Instead, like a vast intellectual river, it went underground, only to resurface with renewed vigor centuries later, irrigating the intellectual landscapes of the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and beyond. This chapter explores how the profound insights, revolutionary methods, and enduring questions of Greek philosophy became indelible cornerstones of Western civilization, shaping its scientific spirit, political ideals, ethical frameworks, and very conception of knowledge and human potential. The echoes of Greek thought resonate not just in academic texts, but in the fundamental principles that define the modern world. 9.1 The Renaissance. The rediscovery of Greek classics. The Dark Ages and limited access. During the early and high Middle Ages in Western Europe, roughly 5th to 12th century CE, direct access to original Greek philosophical texts was largely lost. Knowledge of Plato was primarily through Latin translations of portions of his dialogues, like Timaeus, and the Neoplatonic interpretations of Augustine and Boethius. Aristotle's Organon logic was available, but most of his other works were unknown. Paradoxically, much of Aristotle's corpus was preserved and developed by Islamic scholars in the Arab world, who translated, commented on, and built upon Greek scientific and philosophical traditions. The re-entry of Greek texts, 12th to 15th centuries, the Crusades, and increased contact with the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world, especially through Spain and Sicily, facilitated the reintroduction of vast numbers of Greek texts, often via Arabic translations, into Western Europe. The full scope of Aristotle's works, his metaphysics, ethics, politics, physics, and biology, burst onto the intellectual scene in the 12th and 13th centuries, causing a profound intellectual upheaval and eventually leading to the scholastic synthesis of Thomas Aquinas, who integrated Aristotle into Christian theology. This was a first renaissance of Greek thought, the Italian Renaissance, 14th to 16th centuries, a deeper dive into Plato. This period saw a renewed and fervent interest in classical antiquity as a whole, focusing on its art, literature, and philosophy. Crucially, Renaissance humanists sought to bypass medieval interpretations and access the original Greek text directly. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 brought many Greek scholars and manuscripts to Italy, further accelerating this process. The Platonic Academy of Florence, founded by Cosimo de' Medici and led by Marsilio Ficino, this was a pivotal intellectual center dedicated to the study and translation of Plato's complete works into Latin. Impact on humanism. Plato's emphasis on the dignity of man, the pursuit of beauty, the immortality of the soul, and the power of human reason resonated deeply with the humanist ideals of the Renaissance, shifting focus from purely theological concerns to human potential and achievement. Influence on art and science. Plato's ideas inspired artists e.g. Botticelli, and indirectly fostered a renewed interest in mathematics and cosmology, e.g. Copernicus's heliocentric model, partly inspired by Platonic harmony. The legacy of rediscovery. The Renaissance wasn't just about bringing old books to light. It was about reclaiming an intellectual heritage that emphasized reason, humanism, and a holistic engagement with the world, setting the stage for subsequent radical shifts in Western thought. 9.2 The Enlightenment. Reason, science, and democracy, building on Renaissance foundations. The Enlightenment, 17th to 18th centuries, was a direct intellectual descendant of the Renaissance, pushed its emphasis on human reason and questioning authority even further. The primacy of reason. Enlightenment thinkers universally championed reason, logos, as the primary tool for understanding the world and solving human problems. This was a direct echo of Greek philosophical rationalism, from Parmenides to Plato and Aristotle. They believed that through reason, humanity could progress, overcome superstition, and establish universal principles of morality and governance, scientific revolution, and empiricism. While many Enlightenment figures were rationalists, the period also saw the triumph of empiricism, knowledge derived from sensory experience and observation, championed by figures like John Locke and David Hume. This empirical spirit owes a clear debt to Aristotle's emphasis on observation and the Milesian philosophers' attempts to explain phenomena through natural causes. The Enlightenment applied these methods systematically to all areas of inquiry, not just nature but also society and human behavior. Newton's physics, unveiling a universe governed by discoverable laws, became the paradigm for this rational empirical approach, inspiring confidence in human reason to unlock nature's secrets. Political ideals and the resurgence of democracy. The Enlightenment's political philosophy was profoundly shaped by Greek ideas, particularly those of the Athenian democracy and Aristotle's political analyses, natural rights and social contract theory. While modern concepts, they built upon Greek ideas of natural law and justice, the ideal of self-governance. The Enlightenment's call for popular sovereignty, representative government, and the rule of law directly mirrored the Athenian ideal of citizens governing themselves, rather than being ruled by despots. Separation of powers. Montesquieu's ideas, which influenced the U.S. Constitution, had precursors in Aristotle's analysis of different governmental functions. Freedom of speech and inquiry. The Socratic ideal of open questioning and robust debate, despite Socrates' fate, became a foundational principle for Enlightenment advocacy of intellectual freedom. Education as a key to progress. Just as Plato envisioned education as central to creating a just polis, Enlightenment thinkers saw universal education as vital for creating enlightened citizens capable of rational thought and self-governance. The legacy of Enlightenment. The Enlightenment codified many of the values we associate with modernity: secularism, human rights, scientific progress, and democratic governance, all of which contain discernible Greek roots. 9.3 Modern philosophy. From Descartes to Kant, echoes of Greece. Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, yet deeply Platonic. Rationalism and foundationalism. René Descartes, 1596 to 1650, began his philosophical quest with radical doubt, seeking indubitable foundations for knowledge. His famous cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, became the starting point. Innate ideas. Descartes believed that certain fundamental ideas, like God, perfection, mathematical truths, were innate, present in the mind from birth, rather than derived from experience. This is a clear echo of Plato's theory of recollection and amnesis, and the existence of a priori knowledge. Mind-body dualism. Descartes' sharp distinction between immaterial, thinking mind, residential cogitans, and the material, extended body, residential extensa, has a direct lineage to Plato's dualism of soul and body and the separation of the intelligible and sensible worlds. Rationalists Spinoza, Leibniz, and Plato's legacy. Subsequent rationalists like Baruch Spinoza and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz continued to search for knowledge derived primarily from reason, building intricate metaphysical systems that, while distinct, often shared Plato's ambition for a coherent, rational explanation of ultimate reality. Spinoza's monism, for example, can be seen as a radical attempt to grasp the unity of all being, resonating with Parmenides and Plotinus. British empiricism, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, and Aristotle's legacy. In contrast to rationalism, British empiricism argued that all knowledge originates from sensory experience. This tradition strongly aligns with Aristotle's empirical approach, which emphasized observation, classification, and the idea that the mind is initially a tabula rasa, blank slate, on which experience writes. John Locke's empiricism, in particular, mirrors Aristotle's method of starting with particulars to arrive at generalities. Kant, the synthesis of rationalism and empiricism, acknowledging Greek problems. Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804, recognized the impasse between rationalism and empiricism. His critical philosophy was an attempt to synthesize the strengths of both while addressing their limitations. Synthetic a priori judgments. Kant argued that knowledge requires both sensory experience, data from the world, and innate categories of understanding, structures of the mind, that organize that experience. This concept combines the empirical, Aristotle, with the rational Plato/Descartes. Noumenal versus phenomenal world. Kant distinguished between the world as it appears to us, phenomenal, and the world as it is in itself, noumenal, which is unknowable. This distinction, while complex, can be seen as a modern reinterpretation of Plato's sensible and intelligible worlds, acknowledging the limits of human access to ultimate reality. Moral philosophy and the categorical imperative. Kant's ethical system, based on universalizable moral laws derived from reason, shares the Greek search for rational, objective ethical principles, though his emphasis on duty differs from Aristotle's virtue ethics. The enduring problems. Modern philosophy, through its various schools, continue to grapple with the fundamental problems first articulated by the Greeks: the nature of reality, metaphysics, the possibility and limits of knowledge, epistemology, the good life, ethics, and the ideal society, political philosophy. 9.4 Contemporary science. Scientific method and critical thinking. The scientific method, a direct descendant of Greek inquiry. While the full modern scientific method, hypothesis, experimentation, falsification, developed much later, its conceptual roots are firmly in ancient Greece. Milesian naturalism. The pre-Socratic shift from supernatural explanations to natural causes, and their search for underlying principles, was a foundational step. Aristotelian empiricism and logic. Aristotle's emphasis on meticulous observation, classification, and logical deduction, syllogism, provided the methodological bedrock. His biological studies, for instance, set a precedent for systematic empirical research. Plato's influence on mathematics. Plato's reverence for mathematics as a gateway to understanding ultimate reality inspired many scientists, e.g. Galileo, Kepler, who believed the universe was written in the language of mathematics. Doubt and skepticism. The Greek tradition of questioning assumptions, Socrates' skeptics, is fundamental to the scientific method, which demands critical scrutiny and falsifiability. Critical thinking as a Greek invention. The very concept of critical thinking, the ability to analyze information objectively, evaluate arguments, identify biases, and question assumptions, is a direct inheritance from Greek philosophy. Socratic method. The process of relentless questioning, exposing contradictions, and demanding clear definitions is the archetypal example of critical inquiry. Aristotelian logic provided the formal tools for evaluating the validity of arguments. Skepticism taught the importance of suspending judgment when evidence is insufficient or contradictory. Impact on modern disciplines. Biology. Aristotle's work laid the groundwork for biological classification. Astronomy and physics. Early Greek cosmological models, though often incorrect, established a desire for rational, geometric explanations of the cosmos. Medicine. Hippocrates, contemporary of Socrates, introduced ethical principles and rational diagnostic methods, moving away from magical cures. The ongoing dialogue. Contemporary science continues to grapple with philosophical questions first posed by the Greeks, such as the nature of causality, the relationship between mind and body, and the ethical implications of technological advancement. 9.5 Democracy, human rights, and education. Enduring Greek legacies. Democracy. Athenian model. The concept of democratia, rule by the people, originated in Athens. While limited, excluding women, slaves, foreigners, it introduced revolutionary ideas. Citizen participation. Direct involvement in governance. Rule of law. Governance by laws, not by arbitrary rulers. Equality before the law. Isonomia, all citizens treated equally under the law. Freedom of speech. Isagoria, the right to speak freely in the assembly. Influence on modern democracies. The American and French revolutions drew direct inspiration from these Athenian ideals, adapting them to larger representative systems. The very language of democracy, politics, and citizen is Greek. Human rights and dignity. While not formulating human rights in the modern sense, Greek philosophy laid crucial groundwork. Stoic universalism. The idea of a shared human reason and a cosmic city, where all humans are inherently equal as rational beings, provided a philosophical basis for universal dignity, transcending social hierarchies. This was a radical idea for its time. Socratic emphasis on the soul. The focus on the inherent worth and moral integrity of the individual soul, rather than social status or wealth, contributed to a deeper understanding of human dignity. Education. Plato's Academy and Aristotle's Lyceum. These were the prototypes for Western universities and institutions of higher learning, emphasizing systematic inquiry, debate, and the pursuit of knowledge across disciplines. Socratic method continues to be a cornerstone of modern pedagogy, promoting active learning, critical thinking, and intellectual autonomy. Holistic education. The Greek ideal of paideia, a comprehensive education encompassing intellectual, moral, and physical development, remains a guiding principle in many educational philosophies. Liberal arts. The liberal arts curriculum, foundational to Western higher education, has roots in Greek studies necessary for a free man. Ethics and the good life. The perennial questions of how should I live and what is the good life originate with the Greeks. Aristotle's virtue ethics continues to be a vibrant field in contemporary moral philosophy, challenging purely deontological or consequentialist approaches. Hellenistic schools, Stoicism, Epicureanism, offer timeless insights into resilience, emotional regulation, and the pursuit of tranquility, highly relevant in our complex modern world. Conclusion to the chapter, overall summary, and transition to the present. The legacy of Greek philosophy is not merely a collection of ancient texts or historical curiosities. It is the very bedrock of Western intellectual tradition. From the rational pursuit of knowledge and the rigorous methods of scientific inquiry to the ideals of self-governance and individual freedom, the Greeks laid the conceptual foundations upon which much of our modern world is built. Their pioneering spirit, their unyielding commitment to reason, and their courage to question everything continue to inspire and guide us. While philosophical debates have evolved and scientific knowledge has exploded, the fundamental questions and the critical spirit instilled by the Greeks remain alive, shaping our societies, informing our ethical choices, and reminding us of the enduring power of ideas to transform the human experience. The journey of thought that began in ancient Greece continues to illuminate our path in the present day. Timeless lessons for the modern world. We've journeyed through millennia, from the pre-Socratic cosmologists to the Roman Stoics and the Neoplatonists who bridged antiquity and the Middle Ages. We've seen how Greek ideas resurfaced in the Renaissance and fueled the Enlightenment, becoming the very bedrock of Western thought. But is this legacy merely a historical curiosity, a relic of a bygone era? Absolutely not. Greek philosophy isn't just a foundation. It's a living tradition, a wellspring of wisdom that continues to offer profound insights and practical guidance for complexities of the 21st century. In an age of unprecedented technological advancement, global interconnectedness, and persistent existential anxieties, the timeless questions and robust frameworks developed by the ancient Greeks remain remarkably relevant, offering powerful tools for navigating our modern lives, fostering critical thinking, and building more flourishing societies. 10.1 Why we still read Plato and Aristotle. Addressing fundamental human questions. The core concerns of Plato and Aristotle. What is reality, metaphysics? How do we know what we know, epistemology? What is the good life, ethics? What is the best way to organize society, politics? Are universal and enduring. Despite scientific and technological progress, these fundamental questions about meaning, purpose, and human nature persist. Reading these thinkers isn't about finding definitive answers, but about understanding the deepest forms these questions can take and the most rigorous attempts to answer them. They provide a vocabulary and conceptual framework that continue to inform contemporary debates in philosophy, political science, and even psychology, models of rigorous thought and system building. Plato's systematic idealism. His theory of forms, while often critiqued, forces us to confront the existence of objective truth, universal values, and the limitations of sensory perception. His dialogues remain masterpieces of philosophical inquiry, demonstrating how to explore complex ideas through dialectic. Aristotle's comprehensive empiricism. His commitment to observation, classification, and logical analysis laid the groundwork for scientific methodology. His vast body of work across disciplines serves as a testament to the power of systematic inquiry and the human drive to categorize and understand the world. They exemplify the intellectual courage to construct grand theories, to think holistically, and to connect seemingly disparate fields of knowledge, developing critical thinking and argumentation. Engaging with Plato's dialogues requires careful textual analysis, identifying arguments, and understanding counterarguments. Aristotle's logic remains the bedrock of formal reasoning, teaching us to identify valid inferences and coherent structures of thought. Studying their critiques of each other, e.g., Aristotle's Critique of the Forms, sharpens our ability to understand philosophical disagreement and build nuanced positions. 10.2 Contemporary Stoicism, Mindfulness and Resilience, a resurgence in popularity. Stoicism is arguably the most visibly resurgent ancient philosophy in the modern world, particularly within self-help, business, military, and tech communities. Core principles for modern challenges. Dichotomy of control. This core Stoic principle, focusing only on what is within our control, our judgments, reactions, character, and accepting what is not, external events, other people's actions, is profoundly relevant in an unpredictable world. It's a powerful tool for managing anxiety, stress, and helplessness in the face of global crises, economic uncertainty, or personal setbacks. Emotional regulation and rationality. Stoicism teaches us to be aware of our emotional responses and to challenge irrational judgments that lead to disturbing passions. This aligns perfectly with modern cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which helps individuals identify and change dysfunctional thought patterns. Resilience and adversity. The Stoic practice of premeditation of evils, premeditatio malorum, helps build mental fortitude, preparing us for challenges and diminishing their shock when they occur. Figures like Marcus Aurelius, facing plague and war, model how to maintain inner calm amidst chaos. Mindfulness and presence. The Stoic emphasis on living in the present moment, focusing on what you can control now, and appreciating what you have, resonates deeply with contemporary mindfulness practices. Stoicism in everyday life. From tech executives seeking focus amidst distraction to athletes cultivating mental toughness, Stoic principles offer a practical operating system for personal development. It provides a framework for dealing with modern pressures like information overload, social media validation, and the constant pursuit of external achievements. 10.3 Aristotelian Ethics in the Digital Age. Virtue ethics as an alternative framework. In a world often dominated by utilitarian, greatest good for the greatest number, or deontological, rule-based ethics, Aristotle's virtue ethics offers compelling alternative. Instead of focusing solely on consequences or strict rules, it asks, what kind of person should I be, and what character traits lead to human flourishing eudaimonia? This is highly relevant today, as it encourages self-reflection on character, habits, and the development of moral excellence. The golden mean in digital life. Aristotle's doctrine of the golden mean, finding a virtuous middle ground between excess and deficiency, provides practical guidance for navigating the challenges of the digital age. Social media. How much engagement is virtuous? Too little might be disengagement. Too much can lead to addiction, envy, or echo chambers. The mean might be mindful, purposeful engagement. Information consumption, avoiding both ignorance, deficiency, and information overload/anxiety, excess. The mean is balanced and discerning consumption. Work-life balance, the mean between workaholism and idleness. It encourages us to cultivate self-awareness and practical wisdom, phronesis, to discern the right balance in complex, rapidly evolving situations. Eudaimonia beyond materialism. Aristotle's conception of happiness, eudaimonia, as an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue, rather than mere pleasure or wealth, offers a powerful counter-narrative to consumerism and external validation. It reminds us that true fulfillment comes from meaningful activities, strong relationships, friendship/philia, intellectual pursuits, and contributing to the community, not just accumulating possessions or likes. Ethics of AI and technology. Aristotle's teleological thinking, understanding the purpose or end of things, can be applied to the development and use of artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. We can ask, what is the telos purpose of this technology, and does it contribute to genuine human flourishing? 10.4 The Socratic Method in Modern Education. Beyond rote learning. In an age of information overload, where facts are readily available, the Socratic method remains profoundly valuable. It shifts the focus from passive absorption of information to active, critical engagement, cultivating critical thinking and intellectual humility. The Socratic practice of relentless questioning encourages students to challenge assumptions, explore underlying beliefs, and identify logical inconsistencies. This is essential for navigating misinformation and complex global issues. The concept of Socratic irony and acknowledging "I know that I know nothing" fosters intellectual humility, crucial for lifelong learning and open-mindedness in a rapidly changing world. Active learning and dialogue. Modern educational approaches, from law school seminars to business school case studies, frequently employ variations of the Socratic method, facilitating deeper understanding through guided discovery and collaborative discussion. It promotes active listening, clear articulation of ideas, and respectful debate, skills vital for both academic success and civic participation. Developing self-awareness. Socrates' emphasis on know thyself remains a cornerstone of personal development and education. By questioning our own beliefs and values, we gain a deeper understanding of who we are, what motivates us, and how we can lead more authentic lives. It encourages continuous self-examination, a practice that transcends academic settings and supports ethical living. 10.5 Greek philosophy as an antidote to current challenges. Combating relativism and post-truth era. In an age where objective truth is often questioned and alternative facts proliferate, Plato's insistence on objective forms and the possibility of universal truth provides a powerful counterargument. The Socratic quest for rigorous definitions and consistent reasoning is an essential bulwark against intellectual sloppiness and sophistry. Navigating existential anxiety. The Hellenistic schools, designed for troubled times, offer direct tools for managing the anxieties of modern life. Stoicism, for control over reactions, resilience in uncertainty, and acceptance of the uncontrollable. Epicureanism, for finding contentment in simplicity, valuing genuine connection over superficial pursuits, and overcoming the fear of death. Skepticism, for intellectual humility, freedom from dogmatism, and the peace that comes from suspending judgment where certainty is impossible. Fostering civic engagement and ethical leadership. Aristotle's political animal concept reminds us of our inherent social nature and the importance of civic participation. His Politics still provides insights into forms of government and the conditions for a flourishing society. Plato's ideal of the philosopher king, however utopian, underscores the need for wise and virtuous leadership, a timeless aspiration in any era. The Socratic pursuit of justice and the examined life remains a call to ethical citizenship, promoting human flourishing in a technological world. Greek philosophy reminds us that technological progress alone doesn't guarantee a good life. It shifts our focus back to the human element, character, wisdom, community, and the cultivation of inner virtues. It encourages us to ask not just can we do it, but should we do it? And what effect will this have on human flourishing? 10.6 Final reflection. The journey of thought continues. The journey of thought that began on the shores of ancient Ionia continues unabated. Greek philosophy, far from being a static collection of ancient ideas, is a dynamic and ever-relevant resource. It offers us not just historical context, but a vibrant dialogue partners for the challenges of today and tomorrow. By engaging with these ancient voices, we learn to think more critically, to question more deeply, and to live more thoughtfully. We discover that many of our modern dilemmas have ancient roots, and that the wisdom forged in response to distant crises can illuminate our own. From the pursuit of happiness to the design of just societies, from the mysteries of the cosmos to the complexities of the human soul, the Greeks laid down the enduring questions and provided a wealth of insights that remain fundamental to our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. The legacy of Greek philosophy is not a closed book, but an open invitation. An invitation to participate in the ongoing conversation about what it means to be human, to seek truth, and to strive for a life well lived. And so, the journey of thought, ignited by the first sages, continues, passed from generation to generation, enriching our present and guiding our future.